All right, so you guys had chapter 7 exam. This is on page 136 of your white book. I'm sorry, 138. You guys had chapter 7 exam. Okay. Yeah, 138. Sorry, I can't read today. How'd you guys do? Any questions? Any questions on what you read? No? All right, let me go ahead and get your scores. Bryn?
None.
Thank you. Nadia? Lauren? Okay. Irasima?
No.
Thank you. Joanna? Thank you. Rosina? No problem. Damwanti?
1 and 6.
Oh, you did 8 as well? Okay. Very good. Mariah? Caitlin? No problem. Joni? Thank you. Gabrielle? Thank you. Erica? And Amy? Thank you. Okay. All right, no comments on there, so no scores to report. All right, guys, we now have 1 week left of class after today. You guys will graduate next Wednesday. We have 3 skills to learn today and 3 skills to learn on Monday, and that'll wrap up the skills. So you're only 6 skills away from mastering everything. It's a great job. Great job. I know, so close. So close. Does anybody have any questions on what we've gone over so far? Any of the skills, any of the theory, anything? All right, I want to spend just a minute and talk to you guys about the written test. So I have a free ebook that I told you about on day one, and I know you guys got the link, and I don't know who's gotten the ebook and who hasn't, but this is something that you're going to want to consider getting and reading through before the state exam. And I'm going to tell you a few things that are in the ebook, and you're going to want to take notes. I'm telling you, you don't have to take notes because it's all in the ebook, okay? So when you go take the written exam for the state exam, remember for the state test, there's a written and a skills. And in here, we're focusing on the skills. But all of the things that I have talked to you about, all of the explanations that I've given are actually for the written test. You're applying them to skills, but those same things are going to be found on the written test. So think of the test like show and tell. Okay, the skills part, you're showing. The written part, you're telling that you know all of the concepts you need to know. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's 5 main topics that are going to be on the written test. You need to know your role. Now, we have spent a ton of time on your role. We've talked about the fact that CNAs follow the care plan, right? We don't alter the care plan. We just read it and follow it, or it's told to us and we follow it, right? The instructions we're given are what we're going to follow. We also know that while we're doing those skills, there are some things, some guidelines we have to remember while we're doing those skills. So if a patient's uncovered or undressed, we're going to use a privacy blanket, right? Those types of questions may be on the state exam. That's all part of your role. So everything you see up here, this is your role. This is your scope of practice. We follow the care plan. The principles are to guide our performance. We do normal. We report everything that we see, hear, smell, or feel to the nurse. And remember that patients are our priority, right? It's always about the patient, not about us. Make sense? So know your role really has everything to do with this. You're going to have quite a few questions on the state exam about your role, because they need to make sure that you're not going to go out there and do something that's going to put the patient in jeopardy. You also need to know normals. Now, normals is more than just vital signs. We do need to know normal vital signs, yes. So what's normal pulse rate? 60 to 100. 60 to 100. What's normal respirations? 12 to 20. What's normal on the top number of the blood pressure or the systolic? Okay, 100 to 119. What's normal bottom number on the blood pressure? 60 to 79. So you know all the normals for blood or for vital signs, and you do need to know those. But normal goes beyond that. When we talk about know your normals, we want to think about what's normal for ages and stages. So what's normal for aging individuals, thinner, drier skin. We've spent some time talking about that, right? We're going to talk a little bit today about incontinence as well, because we're going to cover pericare. We know that as strength decreases, effort has to increase, and we have to be concerned about conserving energy in our elderly patients. That's why we use gait belts to help them stand, right? So that they're not utilizing quite so much energy. So we also know that sometimes we need to rearrange the tasks we have to do around our patients' energy levels, right? Because not everybody is a morning person. We also need, we're going to talk about this a little bit today when we get to feeding a resident. We also need to know that all throughout your young life, we generally eat our heavier meal at night, right? But as we age, that actually can be counterproductive. So a lot of older people prefer to eat a larger meal earlier in the day and then just something little later in the day. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and that's normal, right? But in order to know what to report to the nurse, what is abnormal, we have to know what's normal. So knowing your normals is a big deal. So know your role and know your normals. Good. Then we have safety. Now, safety is a subject all by itself because it's so important. It doesn't do it. We could be the best bed bath giver in the whole wide world, but if our patient is unsafe while we're giving that bed bath, we're really not helping them. Make sense? So safety is a topic all by itself. And we've talked a lot about safety in the program. We've talked about the bed needing to be in the low position. We've talked about the head of the bed needing to be elevated for mouth care or feeding or things like that. We've talked about all different types of ways to keep our patients safe. Patient needs to be in the middle of the bed at all times, right? So all of those things, the right way to use a gait belt, the patient needs shoes on to walk. Those are all important safety things. But I've taught them to you in a way that we didn't like break it out and say, okay, this is all the safety stuff, because safety is a part of every single skill. Does that make sense? Okay. So remember all of the safety things that we've talked about. But I want to talk to you just a little bit about another concept of safety that we haven't really talked too much about. We're going to get back to that in just a few minutes. Okay. So know your role, know your normals, safety. Those are three of the things that the written test is going to talk to you about. And then we have infection control. Now, infection control is a subject all by itself. It's part of safety, but we have to break that out and make it something all by itself, because it's really the biggest risk to the patient. Because remember, we put all of our sick patients in one place. And if we're not careful, we can easily spread things one patient to another. So infection control, you're going to have specific questions on the state exam about infection control. So we need to know things like the first thing your gloves should touch is the patient. You have to be aware of what your dirty gloves are touching after you've contaminated them. We don't want to touch the sheet that's going to go right up next to the face with dirty gloves. We don't want any linens to touch the floor, clean or dirty, right? So all of those things that we've talked about fall under infection control. Good. So you're seeing that all the things that they're grading us on the state exam are actually covered in what we've talked about in class. So I've given you really easy to remember principles. So when you're reading a question, you're going to go, oh yeah, I remember. Okay, that I've got a saying for that. Good. And then finally, we have patient rights. Now, patient rights is, I've got a whole banner over there on patient rights. Patient rights is one of those things that's kind of hard to define, but it's all about putting the patient first, treating the patient the way you would want to be treated if you were the patient. So things like asking them permission, explaining what we're doing, talking all the way through it, treating them like they're a person, not a patient. Those are all very important parts of patient rights. HIPAA goes along with patient rights as well. We don't have the right to share people's information. We don't have that authority. So basically, don't talk about your patients to anybody who doesn't absolutely need to know what you're saying about your patients. So that would be the nurse. That's pretty much it. Right? We have to have permission. Be ultra careful, though, about HIPAA, because this is getting people into trouble right now on social media. So a lot of people that when it comes to social media, we tend to overshare everything. And we are in a society that, we're all about the likes and the shares and, how much engagement you get on posts. And a lot of our caregivers are posting videos and photos of things that they think are cute in a clinical setting. Look at these two old people holding hands. Isn't that cute? Would you take a picture of two middle-aged people holding hands to random strangers and post it and say, isn't this cute? Right? Just because they're older and they're in a facility doesn't give you that right to do so. Does that make sense? And it's all about, trying to get engagement, right? You got to be super careful here. Don't do that. Post your own stuff, but nothing from a clinical setting. Now, where this is getting people in trouble right now is because they'll say, oh, I asked the patient if I could do that. You don't have that right. That statement, oh, I asked the patient if I could post it, does not get you out of hot water. You will still be liable for posting personal information. Does that make sense? Same thing with HIPAA. Oh, yeah, I told her daughter everything because the patient said I could. You do not get to make that call. The nurse does. So if the daughter is asking for information and the patient says, yeah, you can let them know. I'm sorry, I can't share that. Let me go get your nurse for you. Okay. We don't get to fall back on, well, the patient said it's okay. Does that make sense? This is getting people in a lot of hot water out there. So be super careful when it comes to social media. Be super careful when it comes to sharing information. Good. Okay. So let me go back to safety real quick. And I want to talk to you about fire safety. Fire safety is something that is going to show up on the state exam. Absolutely, 100%. You will have a question on fire safety. And I know that chapter 2 went over fire safety, 2 or 3, I can't remember, but I want to spend some time talking about it. So rainy days like we have today, they're very dangerous in a healthcare setting. They're very dangerous in a healthcare setting, not because of lightning. Everybody thinks it's because of lightning. It has nothing to do with lightning. Rainy days are dangerous because your smokers are going to smoke. And if staff members aren't taking them out because it's raining, they will find a place to smoke. And it's usually in a bathroom with the door closed, or it might be in a supply closet or in a little alcove in a hallway, but they will find a place to smoke. And they know they're not allowed to do that. So they get really sneaky. And if they see a staff member coming by, they tend to stash the lit cigarette wherever they can stash that lit cigarette. And it's usually in a trash can full of paper towels. So fire is a very real possibility in clinical settings. Now, if we had a fire in this room, it's not a big deal. We got some fire extinguishers right there, where the doors are, and all of you can get up out of your chairs and exit, right? I don't have to get involved. Just go. Right? Don't wait for my okay. Just go. There's a fire in here. We don't want to be in the same place as a fire. But when we have patients, that changes. Because now the fire extinguishers are way far away down at the end of the hallway. The patients may not have a clue where the doors are because they're in a room, how to exit the facility. And even more importantly, your patients may not be able to exit the facility on their own. So now we've got a really serious situation on our hands. We have patients that can't enforce their own safety in a strange setting that they may not be familiar with, and a fire. So we have to have a very well-defined process that we don't ever have to think about. We just automatically do. And this is called RACE, RACE. This stands for the 4 steps that we take when there's a fire. R is for rescue or remove the resident. You need to get them out. Fires and patients should never be in the same place at the same time. That's just a really good rule. If there's a fire in this room, I shouldn't have any patients in it. Fires and patients don't go together. So I got to get the patients out of the room. That's the first step. get them safe. Then we're going to sound the alarm. So A is for alarm or activate your emergency system. So we got to let somebody know. Ideally, we need to let everybody know that there's a fire here. C is for contain or close the door. Facilities are constructed different than your houses. A lot of people don't realize this. If this is a commercial building, right? So in between this unit and the next one, this unit and the next one, in between these walls are actually cinder block walls with metal studs, nothing flammable. So if there's a fire in this room and we close the door and there's no air getting in, that fire will eventually burn itself out. It will never spread to the other sections. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Facilities are built that way as well. Facilities are built in pods. If you've ever been in a hospital or a nursing home, at the end of the hallway, they got those great big, huge, heavy doors that are usually propped open. But if the fire alarm sounds, those doors automatically close. Nobody has to do it. I mean, when they hit that alarm, those doors will automatically close, and that blocks off that pod. Now, it doesn't lock. People can still come and go, but it blocks off that pod. So even if that entire pod were to catch on fire, it's not going to spread to the rest of the facility. Make sense? But that only works if the doors are closed. So when we have a fire, we get the patient out of the room. We let somebody know, hey, there's a fire. Somebody hit the fire alarm. And we close that door to keep that fire in that space. Good? Then, and only then, if you want to play firefighter and somebody's trained you on how to use a fire extinguisher, you can go grab one and see if you can put it out. Me, I'm waiting for the cute guys in the big truck to come, right? They don't pay me enough to play firefighter. But if I needed to, if it was a small fire and I felt that I could control it, then yes, I could go over and get that fire extinguisher, but I need to know how to use it correctly, because the chances of me making a small fire or a big fire with that thing are actually pretty good. And let me explain to you how this actually happened here in Florida. Real story. Drizzly day like what we have out there. A patient was in his room in a wheelchair beside his bed, smoking a cigarette. His neighbor, the bed right next to him, bedbound guy on oxygen. Okay. So a staff member's walking down the hallway, smells smoke, takes a step back, looks in the room and says, Charlie, you smoking? Charlie's like, nope, not me, and throws a cigarette in the trash can right there. Same way most fires start in a clinical setting. So about 3 or 4 minutes later, the staff member realizes, okay, we got a real fire. You know, that all those paper towels finally caught, they caught on fire because he didn't know the guy threw the cigarette in the trash can. So now we got a fire. So he goes in the room, he sees the smoke, he realizes what happens. He goes to the end of the hall, picks up the fire extinguisher, comes back in, and it's a small trash can like this, like what we have over here, just a small trash can. Fire's inside, nicely contained. I mean, it's an easy fire to put out. So he grabs fire extinguisher, he takes the nozzle, puts it down into the trash can, squeezes the thing, and everything that's coming out of there is under pressure. So what do you think happened when he's got a liquid under pressure or foam under pressure directed into a cylindrical can? What happened? Fire. Absolutely. Everything erupted. And all of those burning paper towels are now landing all over the room, including on top of the roommate who had oxygen on. Now we've got a much bigger problem because oxygen doesn't just go into the nose. It actually forms like a little cloud around your face. Like, because it's dense. It's, if you looked at an infrared, somebody on oxygen, they've got this like blue halo all around their face because the oxygen kind of concentrates there. So now all of that oxygen, which is flammable, starts to burn. The tube, which is now, directing oxygen into the guy's nose, is plastic. What happens to plastic in the presence of fire? Now that fire is following the trail of oxygen into the patient. So was this just a small fire, no big deal? We have to know the proper procedure. So the first thing the guy did wrong is he didn't get the patients out of the same place as the fire, right? If there weren't any patients when he put the fire extinguisher hose down and had the whole problem, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal because there's no patients there. The second thing he didn't do is close the door, or I'm sorry, activate the alarm. Nobody knew he was playing firefighter. Nobody knew. The first thing anybody knows is, oh my gosh, this entire room is on fire. How the heck did that happen? The third thing he did wrong is he didn't close the door. So now that fire has an opportunity to spread beyond the room. And then the fourth thing that he really shouldn't have done is use the fire extinguisher when he didn't properly know how. We don't stick that nozzle into a trash can because everything will come out. We start at the top and sweep across to let the foam sink. So because the staff member thought he was doing the right thing, but ultimately ended up hurting two patients and violating every safety rule that we have, he was ultimately let go and had to go through remediation at the state board level. Right? So these rules exist for the safety of everybody. You will have a fire safety question on the state exam. Will, not might, will. Now, more importantly, every facility has an annual inspection by the state and an inspection every almost 2 years by the Joint Commission. And these two inspections are designed to make sure that the patients are safe and well cared for and the staff is competent and, all the things that should happen, right? Okay, so on these inspections, what the site visits or what they're called, the one question that they can ask anybody with a badge, whether you're dietary or landscaping or patient care or administration, doesn't matter. If you have a badge on, they can stop you in the hallway and say, what is your first action if you see a fire in this facility? And you have to be able to answer it. So on the back of most of your employer badges is RACE, and you're allowed to look. You can say, oh, I don't know. Hold on. Let me look at my badge. Oh, R, rescue. I'm rescuing patients. That's my first thing. I'm getting everybody out of the way and you'll be okay. But if you don't know the answer to that question, that facility can be fined up to $10,000. So this is a pretty important subject, you think? So this isn't the first time or the last time you're going to hear this. I know your book covered it. And when you get hired, your employer is going to cover their fire safety process with you. If they don't, you probably ought to find out what it is. Okay, good. Questions on that? So that brings me to yes.
Sorry. The E, what does that stand?
Extinguish.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, extinguish.
Yeah, the badge socially and the facilities, they have all the information in the
Yep.
badge. Not only race, they have a code.
Right, all of the code. That's in a hospital setting, yeah. Clinical setting. They'll have codes like code red is fire, code blue is a medical emergency cardiac arrest. Code pink is a baby usually. But every facility has a little bit different code system. They're not universally standardized. So you need to find out what your code system is and what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, I was see the code green. Green is for the hurricanes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Orange is often for mass casualty. If you live in the Midwest where they have like the big tornadoes that come through, like the really big tornadoes, they usually have a code gray for tornado. And that's a whole nother process you have to learn. Out in the West, they have processes for earthquakes, right? So every region has their own natural disaster protocols. Here we focus primarily on hurricanes because that's our main natural disaster. So does that make sense, guys? Okay. All right. So that brings me to policies and procedures. So how many of you guys have ever worked a job? Like for pay, you went somewhere, clocked in, worked, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wherever you worked, they have a policy and procedure manual. I guarantee they do. Everywhere you work. That policy and procedure manual is telling you how they want things done at this facility. I don't care how you did it at your last facility. You're not working there anymore. This is how I want things done here. Make sense? How many of you guys have ever taken the policy and procedure book down and actually looked through it to find out what they want you to do? Yeah. That's the problem, right? Your job comes with an instruction manual. We often say, man, I really wish somebody had told me. Well, there's a whole book that tells you. When you go to orientation, any job that you go to, you should spend a few hours going through the policy and procedure manual and familiarizing yourself with how things are supposed to be done there. And have I told you guys the house cleaning story? Okay, let me explain to you why this is important. A couple of years ago, I'm incredibly busy. I mean, I work 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I hardly ever take any time off. And I needed help cleaning my house because I don't have time to do that with everything else that I do. So I hired a house cleaning company. And it was my fault because I did not set clear expectations. I figured they're house cleaners. They should know what I want done. I have a house. They clean the house. This should be perfect, right? Except that it wasn't so perfect. Team of 3 people came and, you know, I showed them all the rooms and I go into my office and I let them have at it. But when they mopped, they didn't move any of the rugs. They didn't wipe down the front of the cabinets that I needed wiped down, right? They dusted the baseboards, but they didn't clean the mirrors in the bathroom. They cleaned the toilets, made the pretty, you know, point with the toilet paper. That was all great, but they didn't like clean the floor around the toilet. So there were things that I thought probably should have been done that weren't done. Now, whose fault is that? Yeah, ultimately it's mine because I did not set clear expectations. I was the one that hired them. I was paying them. I needed to tell them what I wanted done. Now, if I said, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I want you to clean all the sliding glass doors inside and out. I want you to take up all the throw rugs and mop. I want you to clean the mirrors in the bathroom, right? I don't care about the baseboard so much. I'd much rather have the cabinets wiped down, right? If I had given them a very clear list of what I wanted, and then they could look at that list, say, okay, we're going to do all of this, and this is our price, but now everybody's on the same page, right? So I've had a house cleaner in my house once. I never called them back, and I haven't contacted anybody else because help is not help if it's not helping, right? If I have to hire a house cleaner and still go back after them and do the things they didn't do, that did not help. Make sense? Okay, so the employer has the responsibility of explaining to the employee exactly how they want things done so that everybody's on the same page. Now, if there's a problem, I could go back to the list and I could say, do you see here where it said I needed you to wipe down the cabinets and you did not do that? I've got something to point to. Does that make sense? That is what a policy and procedure book is. It is the way I, as an employer, want things done here. It's a way for you to know exactly what I expect of you, but it also can be used for remediation. I can go back to that policy and procedure and say, look, you remember this? You read this. This is the way I need it done. Let's refresh. Does that make sense? It is the single most important document in your facility, and you probably have never read it. Because if that facility gets sued because of something you did, you better believe that that facility is pulling that book off that shelf and saying, this is what my employee was instructed to do. And if you did not do that, you are now liable because you are operating outside of the policy and procedure. So if you want to reduce your liability, if you don't want to be sued, you better know everything that's in that policy and procedure book. And if you're unsure, you should be looking stuff up. Does that make sense? You will have a question on the state exam about the policy and procedure book. Now, it's kind of interesting and a little funny that I've had several students that after I explain that, they leave my class, they go to work, they pull out the policy procedure manual and flip through it. And they're like, Miss Patti, they actually have your pages from your book in the policy and procedure manual, that this is how they want things done. So a lot of the things that you're learning in this class will probably be reflected in the policy and procedure manual, but you still need to absolutely look through it. Good. So those are the 5 things that are going to be on the written exam. Know your role, know your normals, safety, and remember the principles cover safety, infection control, and patient rights. So when it comes to patient rights, it's a really easy way to remember this. Never treat an adult like a child. If it's something you would do for a child, you will not do it on an adult. We do not send adults to timeout. We do not withhold food or fluid until they say please. We do not insist that they do anything. We don't treat adults like children. Now, a lot of adults may act like children, but that's their right. We're not going to treat them like a child. That makes sense? If you remember those things that we've talked about, the written test becomes crazy easy for you. Now, in your white book on page 142, I have a practice test for you. Do not take it yet. You're not ready. But after the class is over, you can take the practice test on page 142. My students tell me all the time that the state test is easier than my practice test. That if you can get the practice, if you can, if you miss 5 or less on the practice test, you're ready for the state exam. But don't take it yet because I'm not done with you. Okay. You do need to know it's there. I also have a practice test on my main website as well for your CNA.com, totally different questions. And then on Tuesday of next week, we're doing the practice test game show again. So those are practice test questions as well, but in a much more fun format. Okay. Good? Questions? All right, so let's learn transfer from bed into a wheelchair. This is on page 50 of your skills book. Okay, there we go. Now my chat loaded. Okay, good morning, Erica. Good morning, Massive Baby. Good morning, Jungie. Okay, Nadia. All right, Nadia. None wrong on chapter 7. Thank you. Okay. Lakeisha says, I just passed my test 2 weeks ago. Your videos helped me. Congratulations. Mariah, good morning. Joanna, good morning. Hi, Melissa. All right. So Nadia, let me put down your scores. Okay. All right. So this particular care plan for transfer resident from bed to wheelchair, this care plan tells us transfer the resident from bed into the wheelchair. The resident is unable to walk or take steps. Please underline that. They're unable to walk or take steps. It's going to be very important to us in just a minute. But they can stand with support. A gate or transfer belt is required to transfer the resident, and the resident will stay in the room. So if you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see this is going to be done on a live testing person, not on a mannequin. And they're going to give you 11 minutes to do this. So you're transferring them out of bed and into a wheelchair, guys. It doesn't take 11 minutes to do that. They're giving you all the time in the world to do this particular skill. But you need to, it says the patient can stand with support. So we're not like supporting their whole weight here. They just can't take steps. So we've got to make sure that that wheelchair is super close to the patient so that when we lift them up and turn them, this wheelchair is right there to sit them down. If you've got the wheelchair too far away, they're going to have to unconsciously take a step to reach it. Because remember, the backs of their legs have to feel the chair before we sit them down, right? So if they can't feel that chair, they're going to subconsciously take that step. And if the person you're doing this on for the state test takes the step, you will fail, because what does our care plan say? They can't take steps. Make sense? So this is one of those skills where you really have to pay attention to the details. Now, we already know 99% of this skill. I'm going to show you the 1% you don't know. All right. But we know to follow the care plan. We know to do the opening. We know to evaluate if we need gloves. We don't know if we need them yet, but we're going to evaluate. We don't need a barrier. We're not going to use a privacy blanket. Linen rules don't apply. Scoot and roll, washing rules, basic cleaning, none of that applies. But we are going to look at shoe rules again, because shoe rules are going to apply to this. Anytime a patient's feet hit the floor, we got to talk about their shoes. This patient's laying in bed. People don't lay in bed with shoes on. So when we get them sitting on the side of the bed, what do you think we're going to have to do? Put shoes on them. We're also going to put a gait belt on. How do we know it's tight enough? 4 fingers. Where does the gait belt go? Around their waist, not around their chest? Be surprised. Tell you a story about that. Couple of years, well, more than a couple of years, probably about 10 years ago now, somebody was here testing. So when we were a testing center, somebody who was here testing, and the evaluator comes out and she's just like dumbfounded. And I'm like, what happened? She says, oh my gosh, this girl, she wasn't sure what to do with the gait belt. And she had seen people, you know, caregivers wearing it around their waist, you know, when it's not in use. And that's pretty common. CNAs will kind of wear it as a loose belt if you don't have it on somebody else, just to carry it, right? So she gets the skill, transfer out of bed and into a wheelchair. And she gets the gait belt because care plan says gait belt, right? And she puts it around her waist and has the patient hold on to it. And then she thinks, okay, maybe this isn't right. So then she takes it off and she puts it around the patient, but she puts it up here under the arms and grabs it from the front to try to lift the patient. And that didn't go so well. So she takes it off the patient and then she tries, I'm not kidding, to put it around both of them. And the evaluator had to stop her because that's a safety concern. When she goes to lift that patient up, now they're tied together. If she loses her balance, what happens? Yeah. So it was just, so let me reiterate. The gait belt goes around the patient's waist and we check it with 4 fingers to make sure it's in the right place. Yeah, you guys are going to see all kinds of stuff on the state exam and it's going to blow your mind because to you, there's no other way to do these skills other than what I've taught you because it just makes sense, right? I've taught you the background behind it. When you go to take the state exam, please remember not everybody that you are testing with was sitting in this class. So you're going to see all kinds of stuff out there during testing. You're probably going to send me a text message and go, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what I saw. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it wrong. I need you to understand that. There's a million different ways to get things done. I have to pick one to show you, and I'm going to explain to you why I picked this one because it's the best option. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if somebody's doing it a different way, that they'll automatically fail. That's why we have RN evaluators. Good? Makes sense? Yeah, but to you guys, this just makes sense now. So we are going to look at shoe rules again, but you already know how to do the closing too. So 99% of this skill you already know. So let's talk about the little bit you don't know. So let's talk about brakes. This skill is all about brakes. Safety, safety, safety. All about brakes. So let me grab a wheelchair to show you. I'm going to take that one. I have 2 wheelchairs in here. Thank you. This one works better than the other one. All right, so those of you at home, you're not going to be able to see. Well, actually, let me unzoom that so they can see. I need a camera. Okay. All right, so when it comes to wheelchairs, brakes are the most important part of the wheelchair. Now, wheelchairs are usually kept folded up like this for storage, just to get them a little bit smaller. To open up a wheelchair, you lift up on the handles to get the big wheels off the floor so there's less friction. So you lift up on the handles just a little bit and pull it apart. That's it. No buttons to push, no levers to pull, nothing like that. Just pull it apart. But not all of them will open all the way. Some of them only open up about that far. And then you got to open them the rest of the way. Well, to open a wheelchair the rest of the way, you have to press down on these sidebars to get the wheelchair open. You don't want your hands down between the seat and the side panels though. If I put my fingers down like this, when I go to, it's going to squish my fingers. So you want to keep your fingers out of the way when you open the seat. Good? All right. So the brakes are going to be located right in front of the wheels. Some brakes you press forward on the lever and the brakes engage. Some you pull back on the lever to engage the brakes. You're going to have to figure out what the wheelchair in the testing center, how it's structured. And they're going to show you. If you get this skill, they actually pull the wheelchair out and show you how it works. Okay. But the brakes are always right in front of the wheels. So these levers here are the brakes. This one, you pull back, and now the wheelchair is locked. If you disengage the brake, you flip them forward, and now the wheelchair will move. Good. So that's what you see right here. The way brakes work on a wheelchair is there's a metal bar right here that presses into the wheel when the brake is engaged. It just stops it from moving. So here you can see no brake. There's a gap. Here you can see brake pressing into the wheel. Good. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the seat height. So the picture shows this pretty well. You can see on this picture a chair height and a wheelchair seat height. Do you see how the wheelchair is higher? That's on purpose. When you're sitting in a chair, we want it low enough that your feet are flat on the floor when you're sitting. But if I've got you in a wheelchair, the whole point of a wheelchair is mobility. I want to be able to push you somewhere. If your feet are flat on the floor, I can't push you somewhere because your feet are in the way. So wheelchairs are always higher, but that means that the legs are going to dangle. Now, dangling legs are actually kind of dangerous long term because all of your veins that bring blood from your feet and lower legs up back up to your heart, they run along the back side of your knees. So when you have legs that are dangling, this edge of the seat right behind the knees are going to compress those veins. So now we don't get good blood flow back to the heart. All of that blood is kind of stuck in the lower legs. That makes them swell. Does that make sense? But anytime blood slows or stops, anybody remember what it does? Clots. So we make our patients more susceptible to blood clots. Doesn't mean they'll happen, but they're more susceptible. So we've increased their risk. Is that a good thing? Probably not. So that's what these are for. These are leg rests and foot pedals. So now the patient is in the wheelchair, they're mobile, and their feet are supported off of the floor. So we have less of that pressure up into the backs of the knees. So we don't have those circulation difficulties. So anytime you have a patient in a wheelchair, their feet should be supported on the foot pedals. But if we have the leg rests and foot pedals like this, we can't get patients into or out of this wheelchair because now there's an obstacle. We've got to get these things out of the way. So foot pedals fold up just like that. And these leg rests are actually locked in place. See how it doesn't fold out to the side? There's a little catch back here. You see this little metal bar? This catch releases the leg rest so they swing out to the side. Okay. So this is what you see here. Foot pedals down and leg rests forward are going to support the feet when the patient is in the wheelchair. So this one is only when the patient is in the wheelchair. This, the foot pedals are up, but those leg rests are still in the way. So we should not have this unless the wheelchair is being folded for storage. This is ready for transfers. Good. So patient in, storage only, ready for transfers. Good. All right. So when we are going to get the patient into the wheelchair and the patient is in bed, we're going to get them sitting on the side of the bed. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. We'll get them sitting up on the side of the bed. And we've got to get that wheelchair at a slight angle right up next to the bed. So do you see how close the patient is to that wheelchair? I mean, there is an inch, maybe. That's what we're looking for. Because when I stand this patient up and turn them, they're going to be right there at the wheelchair and we'll be able to sit them down without them taking a step. Good. Okay. The brakes must be applied, must be applied anytime the wheelchair is not in motion. If the wheelchair is in motion, no brakes. Any other time, brakes. And that's because floors are rarely level, especially in Florida. Especially in Florida, because we have a lot of concrete floors. The concrete is on sand. We don't have good soil here in Florida. We have sand. We are nothing but one big beach. So sand is not a solid surface. If you put heavy concrete on sand over time, anybody know what happens? It shifts, and that means that your concrete can crack. Now we don't have a nice, flat, level surface. Now, what do you think is going to happen if I put a 150-pound person in this wheelchair and give it some mass and put it on an uneven surface without brakes? It's going to start moving. What's going to stop it? Yeah, whatever it runs into.
You don't found nothing, so take your.
Yeah, so either another patient or a wall or stairs.
That's the most very bad.
It's very bad.
They almost try their kill.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the largest monetary lawsuit in Florida, was from that purpose right there. Yeah. That patient was immobile in a wheelchair, but very cognitively aware. They just couldn't move in a wheelchair that was rolling slowly, and then a little faster, and then a little faster, and then a little faster, picking up speed and momentum, and down a concrete flight of steps. Now, can you imagine being the patient in the chair and knowing this was going to happen? Watching it for minutes, and nobody helped. Can you imagine? That's horrible.
Usually that's not nice, but the people don't listen in, when they call in the lights.
Yeah.
And the patient, I saw one thing, I don't like it. It's that way I become used to in CNA. The patient is in the floor, one patient in the floor, because she leaves the bed and go to the commode at the side of the bed. And I was here when she's screaming, say help. But I was the other side, and I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the nurse, and I say, somebody screaming help. And she said, nah, she's crazy. And I say, okay. So I go finish my job the other side. It's over an hour. And she still help. So I go back and I go see her on the floor. And she said, you can help me. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it because, I'm housekeeping. I'm not CNA, no, nothing. And I said, just give me a minute. I'm just looking for somebody. And I go taking the nurse and say, no, she's crazy. And I say, no, she's not. And I got it like that. And I say, you're coming with me right now. And I take and I say, you don't do it to me again. And I say, okay, just follow me, please. So I take her and I say, you see that? It's over an hour. And somebody asking me what happened to the lady. And I say over an hour. And please don't say nothing. I say, yes, I say it.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody asking me what happened to the lady. I say it. And they call everybody and say, help me. The lady for over an hour, she's on the floor. And
it is abuse. Yeah. Absolutely. So and somebody should be held accountable for that. Absolutely. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, they say that the worst place to have a heart attack, anybody know what the very worst place to have a heart attack is? The hospital. Why?
Because everyone else is there sick and they don't see you as a priority.
Right. That's exactly it. And the problem is that, when you have a heart attack at home, you have chest pain, shortness of breath, whatever the symptoms are that you have, you're going to pick up the phone and call 911, right? You're going to get help, right? In a hospital, you don't have an ability to call 911. You hit the call light and you think, okay, I'm in a hospital. There's nurses, there's doctors. I'll certainly get help. But when you hit that call light, nobody comes. It's the worst place to have a heart, because we, in the hospital, we aren't thinking heart attack. We're thinking whatever brought you in, what your current problem is. But because you already have a current problem, that means that you're at much greater risk for a cardiac event. But we don't think along those lines. So we look at call lights as nuisances. Oh, somebody just wants a cup of water. Somebody wants a blanket. Somebody wants their TV remote that fell. Somebody wants to go to the bathroom, right? They're all what we call nuisance. Those are not nuisance calls, guys. That is a patient with a serious need. And you never know what's on the other side of that call light. And emergencies happen. And I'll tell you one that's worse than that one. Happened right here in this county. And thank God I wasn't involved in it, because heads would have rolled for sure. Heads would have rolled. So there's two male patients in a room in a rehab center in our county, right? These are two male patients that are going through physical therapy. They can't be home. They're in a rehab, but they're pretty sound mind, pretty, they've got some physical ailments. Well, one of them had esophageal varices. Now, these are varicose veins inside the esophagus that often happens when you have liver damage, prolonged liver damage. And that particular night, for whatever reason, this guy had some crunchy chips, like tortilla chips or something. And you're not supposed to have things that are really crunchy when you have esophageal varices, but maybe his family brought him in. Maybe he got him from his roommate. We don't know. But, he had some. And after a little bit, he starts projectile vomiting blood. Now, when you have esophageal varices and they rupture and all of that blood goes down into the stomach does not like blood, so it exits it forcefully, quickly. So this guy is literally throwing blood up across the room. And he's hitting the call light, right? Need help, need help, need help. This is serious. Need help, need help, need help. Nobody comes. The roommate starts screaming down the hallway, help, help, right? Because now the room is looking like a horror scene, from a Oktoberfest scare festival or something, right? Scared to death. Starts yelling, help, help, help. Nobody comes. They see people in the hallway. Nobody's coming. Nobody's helping. So the roommate grabs his phone and calls 911 on his cell phone. So this is about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. The facility is locked because, they lock the facility, the doors around 9. And fire and EMS and a cop car all show up to the front door and start banging on the door. The nurse at the end of the hallway comes up. She's like, what's going on? Why are you here? They're like, you have a medical emergency in your facility. She says, no, I don't. I didn't call. I'm the only one that could call. And they said, no, a patient called. Let us in. And she sat there for like 5 minutes arguing with them. Finally, they get in and they push past her, and this guy had died because he bled out, and nobody addressed it.
Another poor guy can't move, and he's in there watching his roommate die. Oh my God!
Isn't that absolutely horrible? All right, so we need to understand that call lights, yes, they might be, I want a cup of water. They might be, I have to go to the bathroom. They might be, I dropped my remote again. Yes, and all of those to your patient are emergencies, by the way. But you don't have the option of ignoring a call light because what you think is on the other side.
This is one thing I always do it. I'm not CNA, I'm not nurse, I'm not nothing like that, but but I see the call lights because the lights is outside the door, and I go to asking the patient and say, do you need something? And I say, I just called the nurse 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, I want to go to the bathroom. And usually, I don't think it's right or not, but I always I take in the CNA, so the nurse, please, the guy is asking for go to the bathroom.
Yes, and you're absolutely right.
I can't wait for that.
Right.
Usually me, I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
And they say, no, but no, you would, is that why you are a CNA or no?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
taking care, because one of those speak Spanish and the other one speak English. And always I say, okay, maybe you in the same situation and nobody see you. Or something.
Right.
So how you feel? I said, you put in your shoes to the patient. Is that why usually so many people say, oh, you go CNA or something because for the money. And I say, no, because I saw so many things I don't want
Right.
somebody doing to me.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. If we've got somebody on IV fluids, we have them tethered to a pole, right?
Mhm.
It's very difficult to get up out of bed by yourself and take that pole with you to go to the bathroom, especially if you got other things going on, right? We don't put healthy people on IVs. We usually put unhealthy people on IVs, right? So they're weak or they have a medical condition. There's a reason that they're on IVs. But that IV, right? Liquid in always equals liquid out. So if we got somebody on an IV, what does that automatically mean they're going to need more of? Bathroom trips. Absolutely. And somehow we forget that. We forget it. And we need to not forget it. Right? Help isn't help if it's not helping. Right? We need to figure out how do we help. So years and years when I first started nursing, so this is way back in the late 80s, early 90s. So way, way, way back when dinosaurs were still a thing, right?
So I'm not born in there already.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I have been a nurse for a very long time. So when I first started at a long-term care facility, it didn't have a very good reputation. And after about, I don't know, 6-8 months of me working there, we got a brand new DON and nobody liked her. Everybody hated her. She was absolutely awful. I mean, just awful. She would go into a patient's room and she would hit the call light and she would write down everybody that walked by that call light and didn't stick their head in. And at the end of the shift, you got an invitation to come see her in her office. And she made you wait. Now you're off shift. You've clocked out. It's on your time. And she made you wait in her office for the amount of time it took for that call light to actually get answered. Everybody hated her. I realized pretty quickly that, oh my gosh, this is how every facility should be run. This is amazing. And she turned that facility, who had a horrible reputation, around, and she got rid of a ton of staff members, and every new staff member that came on, she personally oriented. This is what I expect. And she made sure that the staff was on point, and she did checks all the time. She'd come around and ask the patients, how are you being treated? Do you have any complaints? What can we do to make your stay more enjoyable? And she turned that facility around. By the time I left, there was a waiting list of patients to get in. So that's amazing. But it's all about remembering why we're there and not getting so caught up into the day-to-day routine, because we're all guilty of that. We get so caught up in the day-to-day routine that we forget about what brought us there to begin with, and the importance of that empathy and that compassion and that morality, making the right decisions. It's really easy after a while to just look at it as a job. And sometimes we need those reminders. We're all guilty, right? It's easy to do, but that's where those reminders come in. And if you've got good administration, that's what they should be doing, is helping re-spark your love of the job. That's what I do every Thursday. That's why I go live every Thursday. It's to answer questions, but it's more to provide that reignition of what brought you into healthcare, to remember why we're all here. So if you find yourself kind of getting in that whole, oh, it's just a job, I got to go to work, tune into my Thursdays because it may help. Okay, good. Questions? So we need to understand that the things that we're learning in here are going to be relevant beyond the test. And this is one of those things. We're going to be transferring a lot of patients out of bed and into a wheelchair. But if we're not doing it correctly, if the patient falls because we forget to lock the wheelchair and it rolls out from under them, or if we pinch their legs as we bring the leg rest forward and tell them, oh, you're being a baby. It didn't hurt that bad, right? Those help isn't help if it doesn't help, right? Make sense? There's a lot of opportunity to hurt patients with this skill. And that's why we do it toward the end of the program, because by now you should have enough safety awareness that all of the potential risks here we can mitigate. Good? Okay. So remember that wheelchairs must be locked when a patient gets in, when a patient gets, out. And if the wheelchair is just sitting, waiting, if the patient's in it and it's just sitting there. So when we leave the room, because if you remember our care plan, it says the resident will stay in the room. So when we leave the room at the end of this skill, the wheelchair must be locked. Good? Okay. So this is the same as what we've done this over and over again. Anytime we go to sit a patient down, we have to make sure that they can feel that seat. If you remember the care plan, it says patient can't take steps or walk, but they can stand with support. So I'm going to lift the patient up and pivot them around, and I want to make sure they can feel that seat under their legs or, behind their legs before I lower them into that wheelchair. But man, that's a lot of time. So if I lift a patient up out of bed, we lift up and we turn, and I ask them, can you feel the wheelchair behind you? And I have to wait for them to see if they can feel the wheelchair behind them and then say yes. That's a lot of time for me to hold that patient in this position. So I don't do that. I tell them when they're sitting, I'm going to lift you up and swing you around. When you feel that wheelchair behind you, say yes, and we'll sit down. Okay. So I'm going to grab the gait belt. Remember, when you feel the wheelchair behind you, say yes. Okay. We're going to lift on the count of 3. Say yes when you feel the wheelchair. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I say it at least once. If I've got somebody that's a little confused, probably twice. If I have someone with dementia, probably 3 times, right? I'm going to get my point across that when they feel that wheelchair, they're going to say yes, and I'm going to help them sit. But I do that here while they're sitting rather than stand them up and then try to give them directions. Good? Because while I'm standing them up, they're probably thinking about how long am I going to be standing here? So we want to try to get this as smooth as possible. All right, so we've seen this before. If the patient's feet hit the floor, we talk about their shoes. Slipper socks are never enough. Can we transfer somebody in slipper socks? No. So let me tell you real quick for the test. When you get signed in on the test, when they look at your IDs and they check you in and all, they're also looking at you. They're kind of sizing each one of you up because they have to pair you up with somebody else. Now, let's say that you get transfer out of bed and into a wheelchair. You get this skill. They're going to try to find somebody your body size or smaller to pair you with. Okay. They're not going to pair you with somebody significantly larger than you. Now they're going to look around and see who would be a good candidate to be your patient. And then they're going to look down and they're going to look at shoes. And if one of those people has slip-on shoes, that's who they're going to pick, because we know you have to put shoes on. We don't want to sit there for 15 minutes while you fuddle with putting shoes on and tying laces and all that. Slip-ons are better. They're going to try to condense this skill a little bit for you. But remember, you have 11 minutes, which is plenty of time to tie shoes. Good? That makes sense? So don't worry too much about getting paired up with somebody significantly larger than you, because they're going to try their best not to do that for the state exam. Remember, this is minimal skills competency. You're not showing you're the best CNA ever in the history of CNAs. You're just showing that you're not going to kill the patient in the first week. Cool. Okay. All right. So 4 fingers between the gait belt and patient. Feet must be flat on the floor. So do these look familiar at all? This is ambulate with a gait belt. We're just not ambulating. Count to 3 before lifting. We're not going to ask if they're dizzy or weak when we lift them. You can, it's okay. But we're going to lift and pivot. Instead of asking if they're dizzy or weak, we're going to make sure that they can feel that seat before we lift them. And then once they tell us they feel the seat, then we're going to lower them down. Same body mechanics are going to apply here. 1 foot across their feet, 1 foot parallel to their body. Same process. So what we need to learn for this particular skill is how to pivot the patient to sit on the side of the bed. And this is something we haven't covered up until now. So this is your new part. Remember I said, 99% of this, including the transfer. You actually know how to do the you don't know that you know it, but you know it because it's the same body mechanics. But we need to pivot the patient to sit on the side of the bed. And you can actually pivot somebody bigger than you. I know you don't think you can, but you can. It's not that hard as long as you know the right process. So just like turning a patient onto their side, there was a process. This has a process too. Okay. So once we get them pivoted to sit on the side of the bed, we want to get the wheelchair in place. We're going to make sure they have shoes on. We're going to put the gait belt on and transfer them into the wheelchair, making sure they can feel the seat behind them. And then after, we're going to make sure that they have proper positioning in the wheelchair. So their hips are all the way back against the back of the seat. Make sure their feet are on the foot pedals. And then what do we have to do before we leave the patient sitting in the wheelchair? Lock it. Okay. So I'm going to show you this skill. I need somebody to come lay down. I need somebody with slip-on shoes. Anybody have slip-on shoes? Thank you. You can take your shoes off, just put them right beside the bed and then lay down in the bed. You can lay down on top of the sheet. It's fine. Hopefully, my knee will let me do this. Okay. Hold on a minute. I can fix that. Okay. That should work. All right, here we go. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Great. I need to get you out of bed and into the wheelchair. Is that okay? Okay, I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. I have clean hands. Okay, I'm just going to set this up here for right now, just to get it out of our way. Let me get a gait belt. And you can get a barrier if you want to, but you really don't need to. You can put the gait belt right in the wheelchair. There's no problem with that. But before I get started, I want to open that wheelchair. So I'm going to bring it close to the bed, open it up, and it's going to hold my gait belt for right now. And I want it within reaching distance. So I don't want it halfway across the room. I want it, close enough. But if I get it too close, if I bring it over here, when I'm trying to bring her legs across, it's going to hit the wheelchair. So you need it a little far away just until we get her sitting on the side of the bed, but within reach. All right, Miss Jones, scoot your whole body toward me. So you're laying on your back on this side of the bed. And I'm going to help you pivot onto the side of the bed. I'm going to do the work. I want you to cross your arms over your chest and relax. So I need a wide base of support. So my legs need to be about shoulder width apart, and I'm going to lean my knees against the bed. So the bed should be locked. Yeah, locked and lowered. Yeah, because I need it for torque. This arm goes underneath her shoulders all the way to that far shoulder, not just a little bit under the body, all the way to the far shoulder. This arm doesn't go under the knees. This is the one everybody messes up. This arm goes over the knees. So under the shoulders and over the knees. And when you do that, it's just a very smooth pivot. If I went under and under, now I'm pushing and pulling. And that doesn't work. Okay. So I'm going to put my hand under your shoulders and one over your knees and just relax for me. 1, 2, 3. Good. Go ahead and scoot back a little bit. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Comfortable? Are you dizzy?
No.
Okay. Let me help you put your shoes on. She's going to put them on.
So this is just demonstration.
No, go ahead and put them all the way on because when I pivot you into the wheelchair, yeah, they will come off when I pivot you. There you go. Okay. So now I'm going to bring the wheelchair close and I want it at a slight angle. My leg rests are out of the way. My foot pedals are up. So I want it at a slight angle and almost touching the patient. You guys see how close that is? It's hard to see on there. And we're going to lock that wheelchair in place. Okay. I'm going to put this gate belt around you. This is going to help me lift you up and get you in the chair. Okay. Put this around. We're going to put it through the first guard by the alligator teeth and pull it so that it's snug. 4 fingers. 4 fingers. And I'll put it through the second guard. Can you bring your feet together? And are your feet flat on the floor? Okay. I want to make sure that's really super close. I'm going to lift you up and turn you around. When you feel that seat behind your legs, I want you to say yes, and I'll help you sit. Okay, so you're going to put your hands on my shoulders. I'm going to lift you up, pivot you around. You'll feel the seat. Say yes. All right, here we go. We're going to lift up. When you feel the seat, say yes. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Oh. And then we'll undo the gate belt. Remember, I never pull it against the skin. So can you lift this arm up for me? Thank you. Remove it. And now, I know I'm leaving her in the room. Care plan told me I was leaving her in the room. But do I want her facing a wall?
No.
Probably not. That's not comfortable. So I'm going to unlock the wheelchair. Lift your legs up for me. And I'm going to turn this around. Try not to hit anything. And I'm going to bring the leg rest forward. Lift her foot and put it on the foot pedal. Let me bring this one forward. There you go. Now your feet are supported on the foot pedals. Back you up a little bit. We'll lock that wheelchair. All right. Are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here? Would you like a magazine before I go? Okay. Call light is right here. If you need anything at all, just hit that red button and I will come. Not much room to work here. I'm going to put the gate belt back where I found it. It's part of clean environment. Open the curtain. Probably just straighten this up a little bit. There we go. Everything looks good. My closing is done. I'm going to wash my hands, think about the steps to my skill, make any corrections. My skill is done. Thank you. Okay, any questions? No? Okay. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take our break. Come back at a 1/4 till, and we'll get into the next 2 skills. You will have some practice time today. Okay, that's fine.
Bueno, no removal y hand washing son skills que no tienen precio. Aquí están todos los principales
Hi, Helen. Thanks for joining. Hi, Helen. Yes. Yes, it should be fine. We fixed it and then we checked it a couple times. It should be okay.
Me gusta leer el libro, pero me baso en las señoritas y ya te dan la explicación, por ejemplo, acciones para poner atención a las cosas.
Excuse me, you know, I'm having a hard time remembering the, blood pressure and,
Vital signs. The respiration or the
is it, oh, it's new. It's on page 39. Oh, thank you. 32 and 39.
So 60 to 100 is going to first. For restorations, color is 100 to 119. Well, the last one, 60 to 70. La sección 6 y 7 van porque
yo básicamente me baso en lo que dice ahí. Prácticamente aquí está todo. Mira.
es la copia de este, pero y otra cosa
ahí se me tiene
Do you remember where the video stuff social post right here by
pero eso es la página preferida, ¿esto también? Mira, aquí lo que usan aquí. La hubiéramos subido el costo y le hubiera que pagar más porque eso
y no me tuvieron.
me subieron por el trabajo.
Ellos son los ellos no lo pagan a ellos. Y esta cosa va a tener las convenciones, yo lo conozco todo. Porque yo lo veo. Te voy a tirar mejor foto, como aquí hay luz, en la casa mía. Hay luz, pero te voy a pasar.
Si le vamos a poner el café con una mujer.
no, algunas cosas sí han ayudado.
Don't do it too hard. Don't do it too fast.
Es lo mismo, ¿sabes? Yo sí, yo no, porque ya lo aprendí.
I can barely feel it. Maybe it's because mine is so light. I barely feel it there. But yeah, it learns from two people.
Ahora yo me hago, ¿no? Yo no. Estoy en cierra, no le digo.
Opening and what things, todos los que se tienen con a ver, abrir y watching. No, pero hay cosas que no ponen se puede pegar un entendido
As long as you feel it. And you know that.
para cambiar el café por la comida.
Casi todos los festivales, pues,
No, el padre de clase,
sí, pero dicen que yo no
por ejemplo, no es tío, ¿verdad? Enseguida van se enojan. Luego los que no. El opening tiene que ver con lo que está ahí.
Practice time today, because you still want to face it too.
No, everybody understand.
Pero no para
If you don't mind, I mean, it's up to you, I can stay. I don't have to go to work, I can stay too. If I need the help,
I mean,
I need the help.
say,
Okay.
even for hours.
Sure.
The weather changes, that's my allergies crazy. Oh my God, it's really cold.
You coming like a small woman.
I never did well in cold weather. But why I'm glad I don't live up north. Now I get in the bush. Well,
Que tú venías
breakfast,
de
slash lunch.
¿Qué pasó?
My uncle lives in town and he took us for rubbish.
Mira, ya puse mi respuesta. Antes de transferir el pastel con el pillo, sobre los pedales. Ah, sería bueno. Hay dos cafés.
You're doing your practice session? I'm.
Porque en el hospital, la que está trabajando trabajando, no van a ser personas que pesan menos que nosotros, no pequeños. Casi le van a tener un pequeño. La cama no sigue. Esto es más fácil cuando uno practica, cuando uno lo hace. Porque si estás siempre de que una persona que necesita instrucción que la estamos haciendo, pues claro. Esto se recuerda que si yo estoy en ahí, después cosas, ya como ellos digan, ah, ¿qué pasa? Que te digan, ya pasaste. Pero acuérdate que ellos van a si te ponen abajo, así, así. Mira todos los ya son muchos pero entonces ahí está todo eso no pueden elegir bueno, lo que vamos a hacer prácticamente es que checar la presión.
No, eso no.
Bueno, pues no sé, no sé, no podría fijar con todo eso.
Es porque la columna de la presentación hoy no toman ni ya como que también.
Eso son todos los suplentes.
Ellos tienen ahí de todo esto.
Smart. Funny.
It's okay, I did actually understand part of that.
¿Tú eres inteligente?
Yeah.
The problem is, say, they don't do skills. When you go to make the they only take them free.
Yeah.
Depends wherever they decide. Oh, what are you doing? Watch your back.
Yeah.
Or transfer work or people.
Yeah. But they say like if you get one of like one-on-one
La presa dice su año.
What page is that on?
But remember, it says 60 questions.
What? The exam is only 50 questions.
There's one, there's one.
check out that something right here. What is
Like
that?
the whole exam? Oh, yeah, but is that the same amount?
Teams,
got me from kinds of.
That's crazy story. Very crazy.
very short.
There's keys at answer for,
Well, if you get to question 70, it's an interpretive test, so the computer is adding up how you're doing subject wise the whole time. And it gives you, it's like 6 or 7 categories, and you have to pass each one. If you answer enough questions correct by the time you get to question 70, it'll kick you out, but it doesn't tell you, oh, you did so good that we're kicking you out at 70. Or you did so bad that we know you're going to fail. You could take the other 70 questions and still fail. So it kicks you out when it has decided whether you passed or you failed. So it can be kicked out at 70 questions, is the earliest you can be kicked out of it, or you could take every single question, which means that you're very much like getting a couple right. And then
Look at for the driver's license, working in the computer.
Yeah.
There's 50 questions.
Yeah.
But you got it 40, you passed.
Yeah.
yeah, it's 60 minutes, it's 60, for 90 minutes.
For 90 minutes.
Oh.
That's a long time.
But it's a long time. Yeah,
That's all I'm doing.
I got kicked out of my EMT exam on question 76. But I passed it. I think I got done and I passed it. So. But we had like a 5-month course. We went over things so much.
Maybe it's one question per minute. You will have time to think and. For the scale, the.
I'm more worried about the skills. I'm worried about forgetting stuff. Thinking half the stuff and it works. And like we were talking about, some of the answers are gonna be to us, if you've got common sense, the answer is gonna be really obvious of like, oh, that's definitely wrong, because I don't know, like the whole, oh, is the dementia patient boring or annoying or something like that, you know, like obviously you're not going to have that, but so we know the dementia patient.
But yeah, because they don't remember nothing anymore.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what she had in her little, the thing? Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Oh,
Well, because it's a PDF, you might just say the PDF they found.
the ebook, it's a PDF.
There you go. You just save that to your phone and then, I feel like, Adobe Acrobat or, Google Drive.
Yeah, it should open up in a Google Chrome or,
So my question is a 60 question, right, for the exam, the state exam. So we need to do all the questions or just?
yes, all of them.
I can memorize 60 questions.
Well, no, you're not memorizing questions. Those, the question, okay, so here's the question, guys. The questions that are in your white book, the practice test, those are not the actual state exam questions. So you're not memorizing the questions. They are similar to what you would see on the state exam. No one can give you the actual test questions because that's a violation of test integrity, right? So the questions that you have in, I know I got to move that, careful. The questions that you have in the white book, the practice test, that is a true practice test.
That's
Okay.
60 questions.
It is 60 questions, just like the state exam, but it's not the same questions as what you'll have on the state exam. No one can give you the actual test questions. Okay. But they're very, very similar in content, you know, the type of information covered and presentation. So the way the questions are worded, very similar. All right, so we're going to move on to feeding a resident in a chair. So go to page 75 for me. How do we know what to do with each patient?
Care plan.
Care plan. So the care plan at the top of the page says, feed a resident a snack who is unable to feed him or herself. The resident is sitting in a chair in an inappropriate position for eating. So I want to stop there for a second. This care plan tells you they're not sitting up straight. It tells you that. The care plans in a clinical setting are not going to tell you that. You're responsible to look to see, are they sitting up straight? But if you look at the bottom of the page, you're going to see this is done on another live testing person, which means you might be the patient for being fed, right? And they're going to give you very specific instructions. They're going to tell you to slouch or slump, and they're going to tell you to only take 3 or 4 bites and then refuse. Okay. But your idea of slouching or slumping might be completely different than somebody else's. So if you just kind of do this, well, it's not sitting up straight, but it doesn't really look inappropriate, right? I know my kids used to eat like this dinner table every night. So this to some people may not seem an inappropriate position for eating. So that's why it actually says it on the care plan. So regardless of what you see with your eyes, that care plan is telling you they are not sitting up straight. So what do you think you need to have them do? Sit up straight. So you're going to ask them, can you please sit up straight? Oh, okay, I can do that. But don't worry about what your eyes are telling you for the test. The care plan says they're not sitting up straight, so you need to ask them. Good? Make sense? All right. And then it says document intake on a food and fluid intake form, which you can see there in the middle of page 75. If you want a bigger version of it, go to page 120. Hold on, where is it? 120 and 121. Those are the actual documentation pages from the state exam. So you can practice with those. All right. So this skill is a little bit different than everything else that we do. And that's why I show it to you kind of toward the end of the program, because it doesn't follow any of our normal rules. We don't use a barrier for this skill because our food tray is the barrier. So we don't need a chucks to put on the table, right? So the barrier doesn't really apply. Gloves, unless there is a specific need for gloves, we're not going to wear them. And that's because a lot of what we eat, our appetite is affected by smell, how the food smells, right? The odor of it. Like I walked in here a few minutes ago, I said, wow, it smells good, right? So the way that things smell when you're eating is going to affect your appetite. Well, gloves have an odor as well. And that odor is actually an appetite suppressant. So if you have gloves on and you're feeding somebody, that glove is going to be right underneath their nose. And once the food goes in their mouth, that glove smell is still there. So it's going to affect how things smell and taste to the patient. It can actually kill their appetite. Does that make sense? So unless there is a need for gloves, if the patient can't control their secretions and they're drooling, or if they have an open sore right there on their mouth, or if, I don't know, if the care plan tells you to wear gloves because they're on contact precautions, that's fine. But other than that, if you don't need them, don't wear them because it will affect the patient's appetite. Does that make sense? So that rule is kind of not the same. This skill is kind of defaulting to no gloves unless there's a need. Okay, good. We don't close the privacy curtain for this one. It's the only skill that we don't close the privacy curtain for, and that's because eating is a social event. Think about all of the big milestones in your life, right? You have birthday parties. There's always food at birthday parties. right? We eat at birthday parties. What about graduations? There's always food at graduations. Yeah, weddings.
Food.
Yeah, food. In fact, we even put, the cake on a display, right? So food. Funerals, food. Baby showers, food. Backyard barbecues, food, right? So food is social in nature. And when you isolate a patient by pulling that curtain, you're isolating them from social interaction, which will ultimately affect their appetite. Does that make sense to everybody? We actually found this out during COVID, because during COVID, we actually kept patients from going into dining rooms to eat together. So everybody now had to eat in their own rooms. And there was a significant amount of weight loss among patients, a lot of failure to thrive among patients in long-term care settings because of this lack of social interaction. People are social creatures. And we found that this had a long-term impact on their social well-being. So not closing the privacy curtain is a good way to help increase social, maybe not interaction, but at least they can see people walking down the hallway. They can feel some sort of connection. It's the only skill that you have to sit. No other skill requires that you sit down. But for feeding, you are required to sit, because if you stand over somebody and shovel food into their mouth, that changes the balance of power. Now they're in a dependent position. And there's something psychological about that. It tends to treat them like a child. And do we ever do anything that treats an adult like a child? So we have to sit. We cannot stand and feed somebody, but it also makes them feel very rushed. And that's not good for digestion. It's not good for oral intake. It's just not a good situation. It's the only skill where you have to have a conversation. Now, all the other skills require us to talk to the patient, but you can kind of get away with it by telling them what you're doing. I'm going to lift your hand above your head like you're asking a question. I'm going to put the gait belt around you. You're kind of telling them what you're doing. You can't do that with feeding because it's very demeaning. I'm going to put some food on the spoon and bring it to your mouth. That's demeaning. We're not doing that. So you actually have to have a real conversation. It doesn't have to be factual. You can make something up. Like they're showing a movie on the big screen in the activity room later. Do you want to go? Or they're playing bingo this afternoon. I hear the jackpot is $2 and Mabel says she's going to win it. Are you interested? Or, hey, did you see those little kids come in for Easter? They were all dressed up. Weren't they adorable? They did that Easter egg hunt in the front lobby. It was make something up. Doesn't matter, right? But you have to have a conversation for the test. Now, in real life, you should be having conversations with your patients, but look around their environment. See what pictures are up there that you can talk about. Ask them what their favorite vacation was. Ask what they used to do for a living. Talk to them, get to know them as a person. So if it's a question that you would ask somebody standing in line behind you at a theme park, it's a question you can certainly ask a patient that you're very intimately involved with. Does that make sense? I wouldn't ask somebody that was standing behind me in line at the theme park, what's your biggest family secret? I wouldn't ask that. Secret is a secret, but I could certainly ask, hey, where are you from?
It's a more common question.
Right. So I'm getting to know them as a person. So anything is kind of fair game, right? Other than, as long as it's something appropriate for a stranger. But you do need to have a conversation with them.
When I was an AMT, I worked in Cincinnati, so there's a few sports teams there, and one of the biggest ones that I would always do, just while I'm taking vitals and that kind of thing, any of my male patients would be like, "You see that the baseball game this weekend?" I didn't even have to mention a team. They
Right.
ramble on for 30 minutes about this game, this team, who
Oh,
the
yeah.
players were, and I was like, cool, we're going.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't even really have to be involved in the conversation. You just make the appropriate noises in the right
Oh, you're
places
right.
and
Back call.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was always like my first go-to when I came to like male patients was
Yep.
I'd ask about sports.
Yep. And that's a very, especially with men. Yeah, it's a very common topic. And you'll learn how to talk to strangers in medicine. The biggest thing is if you want to be known as a good conversationalist, learn how to get people to talk about themselves. Nobody cares what I have to say. They don't care about my story. They just want an opening to tell me about theirs. So if you learn a few questions you can ask to give them that opening, people will talk for hours and you'll be known as a great conversationalist without ever having to say a word, right? You just have to, and you don't even really have to listen all that closely. You just have to make the right noises in the right places, you know? It's a good skill to develop. It's a very good skill to develop. So the thing that makes this skill a little bit different is we don't use a barrier. We have to have a conversation. We're going to sit. We're not going to use gloves for this one. And I know I'm no privacy curtain. Something else too. Oh, okay. Let's talk about conversation. A lot of people will not talk to patients while they're eating because, well, I don't want them to talk with their mouth full. That's rude. But the answer to that is you guys talk while you're eating all the time. You just don't really think about it. When you go out to a restaurant, so let's say that we all go over to Cody's for lunch today because it's buy one, get one fajitas, which is an awesome day to go to Cody's, right? So say we all go after class over to Cody's. If we were, and it's always busy on Wednesday, right? There's lots of tables full of people at lunchtime, all getting buy one, get one fajitas. If we walked in there and there were 60 people all sitting at different tables, but it was dead silent in there, is that normal? No, when you walk in a restaurant, what do you hear? Talking, right? Everybody's having their own conversations. They're eating. They're not talking with food in their mouth. One person is talking, the other's chewing. When that person swallows, that person takes a bite, and then you talk. We talk when we eat all the time. That's part of the socialization. It's not dead quiet. And you know that if you've ever been out to eat, it is not quiet. So this is the same thing, right? Our patients aren't going to talk with their mouth full. We can talk during that time, talking about the sports teams or about a vacation or about something that's coming up, whatever. But you need to make sure that you are encouraging that social aspect of eating. If you don't, they're not going to eat real well. Now, years and years ago, we had this little old lady in the nursing home I worked at that was losing weight. She was down under 90 pounds. I mean, she was losing weight. Little tiny, little bird of a woman, tiny. And I kept asking the patients, is she eating? No, she's not eating very well. She's not eating very well. Well, me as a nurse, I'm automatically going to assume there's something medically wrong with her. So I'm getting in touch with the doctor. We're ordering some tests. Maybe it's, something abdominal, so we're running a cancer screening test and everything's coming back okay. And I'm just trying to figure out, what is going on with this woman? Why is her weight dropping? And come to find out that the CNA that was feeding her was not interacting with her at all. She would stand at the bedside and watch TV while she would do this. Right, just kind of shovel food in everywhere. Well, the patient wasn't eating. Well, I can kind of figure out why. That patient felt like they were an imposition. That's not the impression that we want to give our patients. So I went in and sat down at the bedside and said, "Oh, Miss Mary, my feet are killing me today. Can I feed you today?" Gives me an excuse to sit here. Can I? Yeah, yeah. So I started feeding her and I started talking to her, and she, after a couple bites, say, "No, I'm done. I'm done." "Oh, no, Miss Mary, I'm not ready to get up yet. Can you just take a couple more bites for me?" And she would. And she finished the whole tray. Why did she finish the whole tray?
Okay.
Yeah. And I made her feel like she was doing me a favor. So it's all in our approach, guys. If we make the patient feel like they are unwanted, unwelcome, and a burden, they are going to act like they are unwanted, unwelcomed, and a burden. No, they don't. They do not want it. And they will stop eating and starve themselves to death so that they're not a burden. Isn't that horrible? We have that power to hurt people. We have to be very careful how we use it. So we want to make them feel on the other extreme, like they're there to help us. And since it's the only skill where you have to sit, take advantage of it. Pull up a seat. Let them know how grateful you are to be sitting and that you'd like to sit here just a little while longer. But if they stop eating, you have to get up. Right? And it's a good way to encourage intake. Does that make sense? Let me tell you guys, this is the hardest skill to be a patient for. Hands down. The hardest skill. We tend to think that pericare is a hard skill, right? Because some stranger's all up in your business. This is way harder for patients than pericare is because it's a psychological issue. The very first skill you become independent at is eating. You learn how to hold your bottle long before you know what hunger is. You learn how to pick up Cheerios and diced peaches off a high chair tray and get them to your mouth before you can even sit up. You learn to feed yourself before you master any other skill in your life. So when you lose the ability to feed yourself, it is a huge psychological blow. It is the most dependent you will ever be. That's huge for your patients. And we don't tend to think about that. We just tend to think a patient needs to be fed. This is a huge deal for your patient. Does that make sense? So we've got to come at this with the right attitude. It's a huge deal. A lot of patients, once they're unable to feed themselves, they decline pretty rapidly. They end up with failure to thrive because it really does affect them. So whatever we can do to help their independence. If we've got somebody with Parkinson's that's shaking too bad to feed themselves, maybe we can get some adaptive equipment that still allows them to be a part of the process. Maybe we can use some finger foods like sandwiches and things that don't spill very easily. Maybe we can fill their cups half full or use a lid on them to help prevent spilling. We need to encourage independence wherever possible, especially when it comes to eating. Does that make sense? This really is the hardest skill to be a patient for. Now, the other problem with this skill is that you know that you need to eat to live. You can only go about 7 days without food before you die. Some people can go a little longer if they've got some reserves. It's 7 to 10 days. That's how close you are to death. If I were to tell you you had 7 days to live, do you think you'd go home and forget it? Right? So you know that you are dependent on another human being to keep you alive. What kind of psychological effect do you think that has? Huge. Now, we have, unfortunately, caregivers that don't take this responsibility seriously, and they'll come in and put a tray down out of reach of the patient and then pick it up and say the patient didn't eat. Isn't that horrible?
That's crazy.
But it's true.
It is true, and it does happen. And your patient knows that. So this is a really hard skill for people. We need to make sure that we have the right attitude with it. Okay. All right. So if you look back on page 72 and 73, this tells you a little bit about what we just talked about. When we're feeding patients, the spoon should only be about half full. And we need to offer a drink before they eat and every 2 or 3 bites. Now, the reason for this is everybody's a little bit different. Some people drink everything before a meal. My aunt was like that. She would drink an entire glass of water before she ate because she said it helped reduce her hunger and she wouldn't eat as much. So it was kind of how she kept her figure up, right? I'm not like that. Water does not fill me up. Right? It doesn't do anything for me. But she was religious about that. She would drink an entire glass of water before she ate. Some other people out there are like that. They like to drink before they eat. Some people like to drink with their foods. Now, I don't produce a lot of saliva, so that's me. I have to have a drink there that I can drink from frequently because I need more liquid to let the food go down, right? So some people drink with a meal. My husband doesn't. He never drinks with a meal. He always drinks after the meal, right? So we have to remember that people have different preferences than we do. And this is going to affect how they eat. So we're going to offer before they can drink or not. We're going to offer every 2 or 3 bites, they can drink or not. And we're going to offer after, right? Because we don't know what our patients' preferences are. We also have to remember that people have different eating preferences as well. So some people like to eat all of one thing on their plate before they move to another thing. Some people like to take a little bit of everything. Some like their corn and mashed potatoes mixed. Some people don't like their foods to touch at all, much less mix them, right? So what if you're a corn and mashed potatoes mixed kind of person and you're helping a patient that doesn't like their foods to touch, and you just mix their corn and mashed potatoes because that's what you do, and you try to feed it to the patient? Are they going to eat it? No. We have to remember that our patients have preferences that may be completely different from ours. Some people eat salads before their meal, but do you know that there's a lot of people that eat salad after the meal? Different preferences. So we need to make sure that we're asking the patient, what do you want first? What do you want next? Do you want the mashed potatoes and the corn together? We need to ask them we're just their hands. We're not there to make their decisions. But the quickest way to ruin a patient's appetite is to feed them in a way that they don't normally eat. Okay. Any questions on that? So we're going to offer a clothing protector at the beginning of this skill. They don't have to wear one. We're not going to call it a bib. Please don't call it a bib. But we are going to offer one. Would you like a clothing protector? They can say yes or no. Me, I need one. I need one now. Everything I eat goes right on my shirt. Every bit of what I haven't figured out how to get food in my mouth yet. I'm still working on it. But my grandmother, she would not want a cloth that's for babies. I am not a baby. I am a grown, dignified woman, and you are not going to treat me like a child. I mean, she would just go off. That she would not want a clothing protector, right? So everybody has different ways that they see this. We also don't want to use choo-choo trains or planes or race car sounds, right? No planes, trains, or automobiles here. You want to feed somebody in a very dignified manner. Now, I'm going to tell you, in a clinical setting, I have had patients that I play around with. I use a lot of humor in my nursing. And I have had patients that I got to know a little bit, and I knew which ones I could play around with. Right? And I may make a noise to get them to laugh and to lighten the mood. But for the test, no planes, trains, or automobiles. We're going to stay dignified, right? Okay. So all of the rules for this particular skill are on page 73. And you can read over that as you go. But let's go to 74 for a moment. So we're going to offer a hand wipe before we feed the patient. And this is because even though we're feeding the patient, so we're going to go to 74 in a minute. Even though we're feeding the patient, that doesn't mean that they can't bring their hand up to wipe something away from their mouth. So we want their hands clean, but it's also part of eating ritual as well. So clean hands is important. Eating rituals are important. Most people wash their hands before they eat. We're going to offer a clothing protector. They don't have to use one. We're going to offer a drink before feeding and every 2 to 3 bites, and we're going to let them leave. We're going to feed slow with a spoon only half full and no childlike feeding techniques. So these are our rules for this particular skill. Please remember though, your patient is going to be instructed at the beginning, whoever's playing the patient is going to be instructed to stop eating after 3 or 4 bites. Just take 3 or 4 bites and stop. So you're only feeding somebody 3 or 4 half spoonfuls. This is not a long skill, right? This isn't going to take a long time. For the test, it's going to be a single serve pudding cup or applesauce cup. So it's not a whole lot. We're feeding them a snack. But you are required to encourage them when they stop eating. Because remember, they're only taking 4 bites. And then they're going to stop. I'm done. I'm finished. I want no more, whatever they're going to say. You need to provide some encouragement. I have 3 that I use. You need to use at least 2. So are you sure you don't want just 1 more bite? You'll always get further by being nice than being mean. So turn up the charm. The second thing I ask is, would you like something different from the kitchen? Because we've all had those days. We go make something, we take a bite, we're like, nope, that's not it. Not what I wanted. I don't know what I want, but that's not it. Maybe your patient's having that day, right? So if this isn't working for them, maybe they want something else. They want to try something else. And then I always tell patients there's food available. If you get hungry later, just let me know. Because not all patients know that they can eat outside of traditional meal times. We have snacks available. So I like to let people know that. Does that make sense? You should use at least 2 on the state exam. You want another bite? Can I get you something different? There's food available if you need it. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to talk about food percentages. This particular skill has us document food percentages. But in order to understand how this works, you always have to know what the patient started with. If I have a single serve pudding cup and I hand it to you and you eat all of it, you ate 100% of that single serve pudding cup, right? But if I hand you that single serve pudding cup and a plate with a sandwich, some chips, and some peaches on it, and all you ate was all of the pudding cup, did you still eat 100%? You have to look at what the patient started with to know percentage. Now, in healthcare, we usually do percentages based on a quarter scale. So that means if they eat everything, it's 100%, cleared their plate. If they eat most, it's 75%. If they eat half, it's 50%. If they just picked at it, it's 25%. If they ate nothing, if when you pick the tray up, it looks just like you dropped it off, that's 0% or refuse. Make sense? So if you look at page 74 on the first column, you'll see a plate that we dropped off for breakfast. Has 2 eggs, 3 strips of bacon, 2 half pieces of toast, and some peaches. That sounds good right about now. And you go pick it up and you see number 1. How much did the patient eat? 100%. What about number 2? There's 1 egg left, 1.5 slices of bacon, 1 piece of toast. Yeah, half. What about number 3? 75. What about number 4? Yeah, they just kind of picked at it. You guys see how this works? All right, let's go back to the test for a second. You have a single serve pudding cup. That's what you're giving them, pudding or applesauce. They're only taking 4 half bites, half spoonfuls. How much are they going to eat? About 25%. Make sense? Now, liquid could change. Liquid is also for the test going to be graded on that quarter scale, but they may not drink it all for the test. It's a possibility. They might drain the whole cup because they're testing and they, cotton mouth because they're nervous. You'll have to go by whatever they actually drink. But for for eating for the test, it's probably going to be about 25%. Good. Now, in a clinical setting, we don't normally record fluids using that quarter scale. You will for the test, but in a clinical setting, fluids are usually documented with absolute numbers. So in order to understand this, we have to be able to convert from ounces to cc's because everything in medicine is always recorded in the metric system. So 1 ounce is worth 30 cc's. If I have a 6-ounce glass of water and I need to know how many cc's that is, 6 ounces, if each ounce is 30 cc's, I would multiply 6 by 30 and get 180. So 6 ounces is 180 cc's. A lot of times your packages will actually tell you how many cc's there are. This is also called mLs. cc's and mLs are the same thing. So a lot of times your packages will already tell you that content. So if you look at the milk carton there, you'll see that it's actually marked 240 mLs. So on your water bottle right there, can you tell me how many mLs are in there? 500 mLs. What about your Rockstar can? It'll give you ounces and mLs. 355. What about your Monster? How much? There you go, 443. So a lot of times your liquid cartons will tell you how many cc's. We like that. That makes it easier. But if we have to do the conversion, you need to know how to do that. For the test, you are going to have a math problem. You will either have to convert from ml or from ounces to mLs, or you'll have to add up a whole bunch of numbers to get the intake for the day. So that's what we're going to do now. If you look at number 9, how much is 6 ounces of juice? How many mLs would that be? 180. What about 8 ounces of milk?
40.
What about 12 ounce? That's a big coffee cup, guys. 360. So if that's what the patient drank during my shift, I would need to add up all 3 of those numbers. Anybody know what that would be? 780. And that would be the total intake for the day. So for the test, you're going to have a math problem. Either they're going to say your patient had 6 ounces of juice. How many mLs would you record? Or your patient had, 180, 240, and 360. What is the total intake for the day? Good. Basic math. Basic math. So let's look at the one on the screen. This is a little different than the one you have in your book. You can see what we started with at the top of the screen. So the very first one, how much did the patient eat?
25%.
About 25%. Yeah, they took a little bit of maybe a quarter of the sandwich, a couple cubes of Jell-O, and maybe a stalk of broccoli. Not a whole lot. What about the second one there? About 50%. What about the third one? Yeah. And the last one?
100.
It would be, even though there's 2 little tiny cubes of Jell-O left, it's close enough to call to 100. It's closer to 100 than it was to 75. So 100 doesn't have to mean every single crumb. You just want to see, is it closer to 100 or closer to 75? Which one? Good. All right. So we just did this, the fluid intake. Okay. So let me show you this video. I am going to show you the video for this because it does have good close-ups. And if you look at the bottom of page 75, you will see that this particular skill, they give you 9 minutes to do this. Guys, you're feeding somebody 4 half spoonfuls of something, right? It doesn't take 9 minutes to feed somebody. I could feed a toddler an entire meal in 9 minutes, right? So way more time than you actually need. Please don't rush. That's the big thing with this particular skill. They are grading on you not rushing the patient.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Patti. I'm your CNA today. Would you like a snare?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm gonna go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Can I ask you to sit up straight for me, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jones, let me get your hands right so that you can wipe your hands. Would you like to take that? Thank you very much. Let me dispose of this. Okay, can I offer you a clothing protector?
Yes, please.
Just place this on your chest. Okay, it looks like we have pudding. How does that sound?
Great.
Very good. Can I offer you a drink before we get started?
Please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
There you go. Do you have any plans for this afternoon?
No.
They're showing a movie on the big screen in the activity room. Would you like me to get more information on that for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. How does the pudding taste?
Delicious.
Very good. Ready for another?
Yes.
Can I offer you a drink? Would you like something to drink?
Yes, please.
Ready for another bite?
Yes, please.
Ready for another bite?
I'm not please.
Are you sure you wouldn't like just one more bite?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Can I get you something else in the kitchen?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let me know if you get hungry later, and we'll get something to eat. We do have food available on the unit.
Thank you.
Want to take the napkin? Okay. I'll remove the clothing protector from you, and we're gonna put this in right in front of you. When you go take care of your tray, I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna place the tray back on your table. Is there anything else I can get for you? A magazine perhaps?
No, thank you.
Your call light is within reach. Please let me know if you should need anything. I'm going to go wash my hands and document.
Okay, thank you.
After washing my hands, I'm going to document the amount of food that this patient ate. Using my documentation form, I'll review the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and tell the evaluator my skill is done.
Me personally, I think that's probably one of the easiest skills for the state exam. Most of us have fed another human at some point in our life. All those main rules apply. You don't want to feed them too quick. You want them to have time to chew and swallow. Make sure they're sitting upright. All those things. There's not much new there to learn, other than offering them a hand wipe, offering them a clothing protector, and make sure that you're documenting at the end. Okay. All right, let's move on to pericare. This is page 110 of your skills book. Oh, sorry, forgot. Did we talk about medical abbreviations already? I think we did. Yeah, okay, so I can skip that. Okay, so pericare. 110. Okay, this care plan states the female patient has been incontinent of urine and needs perineal care. The pad under the resident is wet, but the hospital gown and bedding is dry. So that's our care plan from the state exam. It's a miracle. It will never, ever, ever happen like that in a clinical setting. If the patient is wet, the gown is wet. And if the gown is wet, the sheets are probably wet. But the state test is going to take it easy on you and give you a scenario that's simple. Remember, entry-level skills. This is a mannequin skill. You know that by looking at the bottom of the page. And the mannequin is not really going to be wet. So you're going to pretend a little bit with this particular skill. But in order to understand this, we kind of have to talk a little bit about incontinence and what it is. And it's probably not exactly what you think it is. So in order to understand incontinence, I want to talk to you about the normal elimination system. So again, 5th grade, right? We're not getting into this real deep. 5th grade anatomy. We have 2 kidneys. Those kidneys are going to filter blood and remove waste products. It makes urine out of those waste products, but it does that 24 hours a day. Your kidneys are always working. When you're awake, when you're sleeping, when you're driving, when you're eating, when you're swimming in a pool, when you're at the movie theater, your kidneys are always working. So as those kidneys filter waste and produce urine, those urine drips go down tubes called ureters, and they are held in the bladder. So drip, 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 drip. It's a good thing we have a bladder, because otherwise we'd spend our entire lives in the bathroom. You wouldn't get anything done. What we want to do is collect all of those drips and hold them in a safe place until we have enough of them that we can get rid of them all at once, right? At the bathroom. So that's what your bladder is. It's nothing more than a Ziploc bag that's holding drips of urine until you get enough of them to make the trip worthwhile. But it needs a valve at the bottom to hold all the urine in the bag. And that valve, when we go to the bathroom, is going to open and let all of that urine out. So everybody good with this? How often do kidneys produce urine? 24/7. Those drips go down tubes and collect in a bladder. A valve at the bottom of the bladder holds the drips in. Good? All right. When you are incontinent, that system still works. Still works. Kidneys still filter blood, produces drips of urine. Those urine drips still go down ureters into the bladder. What is broken here is the valve. That's what's broken. Everything else still works. The valve is broken. So what happens to those drips? They come out. Absolutely. There's nothing to hold them in the bladder. So that means that your kidneys work how often? And those drips go down into the bladder 24/7. If there's nothing there to keep those drips in the bladder, they're going to come out 24/7. Your incontinent patients are going to be wet all the time. Drip, drip, drip. Good? If you've got a patient that is dry, 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 really, really wet, you do not have an incontinent patient. You have incompetent staff members and aren't getting that patient to the bathroom. Okay. True incontinent patients are going to be wet all the time. Now, the good news here is that that valve is a muscle. What happens when you work out muscles? They get stronger. So we can actually help our patients develop continence again by taking them to the bathroom on a regular schedule, usually every 2 hours around the clock. And we are working that muscle. And before you know it, usually 3 to 5 days, the patient will become mostly continent again, which is a good news scenario. The problem here, and it is a problem, is that we have a lot of lazy caregivers out there. And those lazy caregivers don't want to get the patient out of bed. Remember how much work it was? Pivot a patient onto the side of the bed, put the gait belt on, and then walk them all the way to the bathroom, get them sitting on the toilet, get their pants off first, get them sitting on the toilet, wait. Done? Okay. Get them standing back up, get their pants back up, walk them back to the bed, get them laying back down, get the gait belt on. That's a lot of work. And it takes a lot of time. So a lot of caregivers just tell the patients, just go in your pants, I'll clean you up later. How many of you guys are willing to go in your pants for somebody else's convenience? Especially when you're paying $4,000 a month. This is happening out there all the time, and it's happening at such a huge rate that facilities are getting fined by those agencies that come in and do the inspections. They're getting fined if a patient came in continent and became incontinent in the facility. Because we know this happens. It shouldn't. Don't let it happen if I'm your patient. Right? That's not how we want to be treated, but it is a problem. So if you've got a patient who is dry, they're not incontinent. Incontinent means wet all the time. Good? Make sense? But the problem is that adult urine is not like baby urine. Baby urine, we don't even count. We don't even call it urine. We call it things like tinkle and TT and PP and cute little names, right? We don't even count it as urine. Baby urine. So our urine is our waste products, right? So if we eat a lot of acid rich foods, and most of the things that we eat as adults are acid rich, that acid is going to get excreted in our urine. Well, babies, they don't eat a lot of acid rich foods. They eat rice cereal and formula and breast milk and, mushed up pears, right? Not a whole lot of acid. So their urine is very neutral, very mild, very bland, like their diet. So you can put a diaper on a baby's bottom, put them to bed, and get them up the next morning, and they still have skin on that tush because their urine is not acidic. Now, adults, we eat a lot of acid in our foods. Our foods are very acidic. So when we pee, a lot of that acid is going to be excreted in our urine. What happens if you hold acid up against skin? It burns. So when we have incontinent adult patients, we can't leave an adult brief. We don't call them diapers. We can't leave an adult brief on them for hours and hours and hours because that acid is going to eat the skin. It'll burn it. So when we have a patient who is incontinent, we have to clean them up every 2 hours around the clock. That means you're waking them up at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. and at 6 a.m. And you're going to get them cleaned up and changed. Don't let them sleep through the night thinking you're doing them any favors. You're not. You're injuring them. But remember I said that if we put somebody on a toileting schedule, like every 2 hours around the clock, we can actually help regain the use of that muscle. You guys remember that? Well, if we're waking them up to clean them up anyway, get them up into the bathroom. Good. Bowel and bladder retraining is becoming a very significant part of CNA tasks because we know this is not good for our patients. Okay, so remember that incontinent patients are always going to be wet. That could be a written test question. But this is also positional. So if I've got a patient laying in bed like this, so let's talk about this lady, right? If I have a bag of fluid and lay it flat, some of that fluid will come out, but some of it's going to stay in just because of the position, right? So if I turn that bag on its side, then more would come out. Does that make sense? Okay, well, the bag is the bladder. So if we have a patient laying in bed on their back, some urine will come out, but some is going to stay in. And then when we turn the patient, it's going to come out. So this is positional. When we are moving incontinent patients, it's not uncommon for them to have a large amount of urine come out because the valve isn't working to hold it in place. Good. It's important that you understand that. We had a male caregiver that was working in, I think it was assisted living facility down south of us. And he turned a female patient over who was incontinent and she urinated, which that's normal. But he saw that as a sign of disrespect. So he beat her to death.
What?
Yeah. This is why you guys need a class. It's not to teach you how to feed patients. It's to teach you how to not kill them. That's why we're here. We need to understand that you have to understand what's normal so that you treat the patients right. Me personally, I kind of think that should be like common sense, but
Is there something wrong with them? Do you understand how it breaks?
yeah, apparently. Yeah. But these things happen, so we have to use them as cautionary tales. But that brings me to another subject, right? I know that none of you would ever intentionally hurt a patient. I know that you're all here for the right reasons, that you all have the right heart. But that doesn't mean that the other people you're going to work with out there do. So what do you think your responsibility is if you see a coworker that is putting a patient in jeopardy, or they're doing things that just they're not quite right? What do you do? Report them. That's right. That's absolutely right. Things don't happen in a vacuum. The facilities, we kind of know what each other is doing, right? We know who the good CNAs are and who the not so good CNAs are. There's unfortunately a culture where people don't want to say anything because they don't want to get involved, or they don't want to get in trouble, or they don't want to be snitches. Or remember that we are responsible for providing care for at-risk individuals. And if you're not saying something, who will? And then we find ourselves in a situation where one of our coworkers beats a patient to death. And we all go, huh, how did that happen? Well, it happened because there were lots of little things that happened that nobody reported. Don't worry about being a snitch. Worry about providing safe and competent care for the patients and pointing out anyone who's not. Does that make sense? It's horrible. It's horrible, but it does happen. Okay. So our patients are going to be wet and we're going to clean them every 2 hours around the clock. Most of your patients, when they're out of bed, will have an adult brief on. We don't call them diapers with adults. You can call them depends. You can call them adult briefs, but not diapers. But there's a problem with these guys, right? They're designed to catch urine and they're waterproof, so the urine doesn't go through onto the clothes because nobody wants to walk around with wet clothes. That's embarrassing. So they're waterproof, but by being waterproof, that means that they're trapping the urine right against the skin. They're trapping in body heat and blocking out light. So we end up with warm, dark, moist. What do we know grows in warm, dark, moist? Yeah, everything bad. Everything bad. All the pathogens. So bacteria, yeast, fungi, all of the bad stuff. So what we're doing is we're trapping all of that urine against the skin, which we know is bad, and we're allowing pathogens to grow in that area. So you end up with yeast infections, urinary tract infections, skin infections. This is a bad system for patients that are incontinent. It's good when they're out of bed because of dignity, but it's not ideal for the skin and the immune system. So when they're out of bed, adult briefs are okay, but we're still going to clean and change them every 2 hours around the clock. If they're in bed, though, there's a better way. When your patient is in bed, we usually don't put adult briefs on them. We leave them open to air. That allows the urine to go onto the pad underneath them, and that pad is going to pull the urine away. So we're not blocking in heat, we're not blocking out light, and we're not holding the urine against all of the skin surfaces, just mainly the bottom or whatever surface of the patient is resting on the pad. Good? So in bed, open to air, out of bed, adult brief. Both of them are going to be cleaned and changed every 2 hours around the clock. Not all patients are going to be comfortable open to air, though. Some patients are going to want an adult brief on even overnight. How do we know which is which? Care plan. Absolutely. We don't have to do that work. The care plan is going to address it for us. But let's think about that pad for a second. So we have a patient open to air laying on that pad. We learned earlier in this program that room temperature always wins. Room temperature always wins. So what was our body temperature? Okay, around 98.6. Urine, when it comes out, it's actually a little hotter than that because urine is, made right up in our furnace area. So urine, when it comes out, about 101 degrees, roughly. So you have 101 degree urine that comes out of the body, hits the pad, 75 degree air. What's going to happen to that urine? It's going to cool down. Remember, room temperature always wins. So that 101 degree urine, when it came out of the body, is now 75 degrees. What's that going to feel like to your patient? Cold, wet, a little slimy, kind of gross. If you were laying on that pad, what would you want done? Yeah, right now, get me on a clean pad. This pad feels icky. So the very first thing we're going to do is change that pad. But now we got a wet butt on a clean pad. So when we're done cleaning the patient, what do you think we should do to that pad again? Change it. So this skill, we're going to change the pad, clean the front of the patient, clean the back of the patient, change the pad again. You already know how to do the cleaning. We're going to use the leaves method. Okay. You already know how to do washing skills. Whatever we wash, whatever we rinse, how do we know the water temperature is good? Yeah, we check it. The patient checks it. We already know this. When we're changing the chucks out, clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls. Yeah, we already know that. Patients uncovered and undressed. So what do we need? I'm all up in their personal space. Do I need gloves?
Yes.
Yeah, I need something to put all these supplies on. So I'm going to get a barrier, yeah. So do my dirty linens go on the floor? No. You know all this. There isn't a single thing in this skill that's new to you. You know all of these principles. We just have to put them together now for you to perform this skill. Good? Make sense?
So for the test, do they use that method?
We're going to use the leaves method. Yes. Yes. So when we're doing peri-care on a female resident, and this care plan specifically said female resident. Male peri-care is done just a little bit differently. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but female residents, the way we wipe is important here because the urethra or the tube from the bladder to the outside world is only about as long as your pinky. That is not far for a bacteria to climb. That's like a day trip, right? It's an easy trip for a bacteria to make. So we have white blood cells that kind of hang out in that urethra, waiting for a bacteria to stumble in that they can get rid of. And as long as the bacteria just come in every so often, they've got it covered. But if we bring a whole busload of bacteria in, those few white blood cells can't control the infection or the pathogens. What you need to understand is every pathogen in the world is trying to get into the bladder. The bladder is the ideal vacation hotspot for bacteria. It's warm, it's dark, it's moist, it's got an all-you-can-eat buffet and an open bar. It is an all-inclusive resort for your bacteria because there's enzymes and proteins in that bladder that make it possible for bacteria to procreate. That's a problem. So our whole goal here is not allowing bacteria into the system. Make sense? So the way we wipe is going to matter because we have bacteria here at the rectal area. If we bring that bacteria up to the urethra, we're bringing busloads of bacteria and our white blood cells aren't going to be able to handle it, which means the patient may develop an infection. Good. Remember, I said 1 out of every 25 people in a hospital get something they didn't come in with. This is one of those things because we wipe the wrong way. So this is one-way trip. We're going to go down the middle, fold our leaf. We're going to go down one side, fold the leaf, the other outside, fold the leaf. And then this area between the leg and the groin, this skin fold, we're going to go down that one, fold the leaf, and down this one with the back side of the washcloth. Got it? So middle, outside, outside, skin fold, skin fold. We go from the middle out. But it's very important that you not go back up. This is a one-way trip. I'm going to go down the middle, away, fold. Down, away, fold. Down, away, fold. Down, away, fold, down. A lot of people get this mixed up. They go down and then back up. Never, ever go back up. That's what they're grading us on here. Okay, whatever we wash, we the exact same way. Whatever we rinse, we dry. And then, oh, I don't have that. Oh, I'm missing one. Okay. So for the back side, because the back side is laying on the wet pad, we have to wash the back side too. So we're going to turn the patient over onto their side so we can get to the back side. And we're going to start at the rectal opening and go up the center crease, up the middle. We're going to fold that leaf over, clean one cheek, fold that leaf over, clean the other cheek, fold that leaf over, and go right up the middle one more time. Because that's kind of like a riverbed. That's where all the urine is going to be channeled. So we want to get that twice. Once, cheek, cheek, second time. While we have the patient over on their side, once their bottom is clean, we'll change that pad out one more time. So now we got a clean bottom on a clean pad. Everybody's happy. We have to clean up all of our supplies. Think about where your gloves have just been. We need those gloves on to touch those washcloths and towels that have been in a very personal area. So we need to take all of our dirty stuff and put it away. Then we can clean our basin, then we can take our gloves off before we pull that sheet up and take the privacy blanket away. Does that make sense? You want to touch that sheet with dirty gloves? Think about where those gloves have been. Good. Any questions?
On number 6 here, it says after washing, rinsing, and drying the peri area, you must wash the patient's.
But
Oh, is that what it is?
Bottom.
Okay.
yeah, buttocks is probably the more correct term.
Gotcha. I was like looking through, and I was like hands. Do we need to
Yeah,
wash our
they
hands
don't
after
count
this?
this.
Yeah,
Okay, that's what they're saying. So peri area is just the genital
The
area,
front,
and then
right.
the
buttocks,
is different.
right.
Separate.
Different washcloth. Good. This is a mannequin skill, thank God. Mannequin skill. If you look at the bottom of the page, they're going to give you 17 minutes to do this. That is a long time. Remember, partial bed bath, we wash like half of the body in 19. This is just like one small area. They give you 17 to do it. So it's you got plenty of time for this. You do need to talk to the mannequin though. It's a mannequin skill, but you better talk to. Can you imagine? Just imagine for a second, you got somebody in your most personal private area and they are completely silent. You'd be like, what's going on down there? What you got going on? Right? If any of you have ever had a female exam done, the person doing the female exam is not silent while they're doing the female exam. They're talking to you because it's very uncomfortable to have somebody in that area completely quiet. So you probably should be talking to the mannequin. Okay? And I would explain what I'm doing. I'm going to wash down the middle. I'm going to wash one side. I'm going to wash the other side. You talk it out so they know. Guys, you have a wet rag in a sensitive area. Trust me, they want to know what you've got going on. Okay. Make sure you're talking to them. Good. Questions? So here's our important points for this particular skill. We're going to change the chucks out. We're going to use the leaves method, and we're going to change the leaf for each stroke. We always clean from front to back. We're going to clean down the middle, then the outer labia on each side, then the skin fold on each side, and we're never going to move back up with those cleaning strokes. We're going to turn the patient on their side, clean the back side, moving away from the anal opening upward, and then change that chucks again. Then we're going to put all the rest of the principles in, your skill rules, your opening, your glove rules, your barrier, your linen rules, your scoot and roll, your washing rules. We'll clean the basin the same way and do the closing. I mean, all those principles are going to be at play here. So lots here. Good. All right. I am going to show you the video for this one because it does have really good close-ups. And that's kind of important for this one. And like I said, thankfully, this is a mannequin skill. Oh, one other thing with the mannequin, I do want to talk to you about this, guys. When we're doing partial bed bath and peri-care skills that require the patient to go onto their side to do a part of the skill, if I put you in the bed on your side, you'd stay on your side because you're a human. Anybody ever play with Barbies? They don't stay on their sides. So since we're working with a mannequin, which is nothing more than a big Barbie doll, they're not going to stay on their side. So the evaluator will actually come over and put their hand on the mannequin once you get them on their side to hold them in place for you. You won't have to ask them to. They'll just do that because they know the mannequins don't stay on their side. Okay. So I get this whole skill done in 11 minutes. You have 17. Plenty of time.
questions. My name is Patti. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Wonderful. I need to do period care. Is that okay? Okay, let me close your curtain, wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to start out with a barrier. This gives me a clean place to place my clean supplies. So I'll place the barrier on the overbed table. And now I'll start gathering my supplies. I'm going to need 2 chucks, 4 washcloths, a privacy blanket, a towel. I'll place these items on the overbed table. I'll need a basin and soap. And I'm going to need a set of gloves. Okay, Ms. Jones, let me go fill the basin. I'll use a paper towel to turn the water on. I'll make sure it's warm, not hot, not cold, just warm. Ms. Jones, would you like to check the water temperature and make sure it's okay? It's good? Good. I'll place my washcloth in the water. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to place this privacy blanket over you. This is going to help keep you warm and protect your privacy while we do this skill. I'm going to spread the blanket out, being careful not to shake it or snap it. And then I'm going to pull your sheet down to about your knees. Now I'll get my chucks ready for use. I'm going to unfold the chucks, fold it up lengthwise and roll it toward me. And I'll repeat that with the second one. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. Now I'll get my gloves on. Okay, Ms. Jones, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to scoot toward me, and we're going to roll you onto your left side so I can change the chuck that's under you. I'll place one of the chucks on the bed. Ms. Jones, could you scoot toward me, please? Thank you. And roll up on your left side. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to roll the dirty chucks toward the patient. Tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean one. And tuck it under the soil. Ms. Jones, can you roll back onto your back, please? Thank you. And scoot to the middle of the bed. Okay, I'll come around to the other side of the bed now. Ms. Jones, can you scoot toward me, please? And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. Remove the soil chucks from the bed and unroll the clean one. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Ms. Jones, we're going to start cleaning now. I'm going to roll your blanket up to about your waist. This is going to expose you. Please let me know if you're uncomfortable in any way. So I'll roll the blanket up. And on the way, I'm going to try to get that gown rolled inside the blanket so that exposes only the period area. I'll cover her upper legs with a towel. And then get my first washcloth. I'm going to wring this out. And soak 5 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to clean now. I'll use the heel of my hand at the top of her hairy area and my index and middle finger to spread her slightly open so I can clean down the inside middle, top to bottom, and then we'll fold that leaf over. We're going to clean the outside labia, top to bottom, down one side, and fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the labia, top to bottom, fold that leaf over. The fourth leaf is going to clean this area between the leg and the groin, the skin fold, top to bottom. We're going to fold that over And we'll repeat it on this side, top to bottom. Now we'll place washcloth back on the barrier. The second washcloth, we're gonna wring out. And we're gonna rinse all of those areas the same way we washed. So we're gonna hold it slightly open to clean down the middle, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're gonna rinse down one side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. Rinse the other side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're going to rinse the skin fold down one side, top to bottom. Fold that over. And the other skin fold, top to bottom. We'll set that aside. Now we're going to dry all of those areas using short, soft strokes or a gentle pat. I'm going to unroll the blanket, which will place her gown back over her legs. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to scooch you toward me now, and we're going to roll you onto your left side so I can clean your back side. Scoot toward me, and we're going to roll you over onto your left side. 1, 2, 3. The evaluator will hold the mannequin in place for you to complete your cleaning of the patient's backside. I'm going to take the fourth washcloth, bring it out really well, and we're going to soak 4 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to start at the angle opening and go up the center crease, right up the middle, and we'll fold that leaf over. The second leaf will clean 1 buttocks. We're going to fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the buttocks. We'll fold that leaf over. And the fourth leaf will clean from the angle opening up the center crease one last time. We're going to set that aside. Whatever we wash, we rinse. So I'll bring that out. And I'm going to rinse the same way we washed. So from the angle opening up the center crease, fold that over. 1 buttocks, fold that over. The other side of the buttocks, fold that over. And once more up the center crease. And then we'll dry all of those areas. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to change that pad out from under you. So you're on a nice clean pad. We'll roll the soiled chucks toward the patient and tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean chucks and tuck it under the soil. Ms. Jones, come on back, please. And scoot to the middle. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Jones, go ahead and scoot toward me. And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. We'll remove the soil chucks from the bed. And unroll the clean. Okay. Go ahead and scoot back to the middle, please. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Ms. Jones, I need to put all of my soiled items away and clean my basin. I'll be back in just a moment to get you situated. These items will go in dirty linen. And the basin is going to be cleaned the same way we clean everything else. We'll dump the water into the sink. Cleanse the basin. Take it up with a paper towel and dry the inside. We'll discard that paper towel. We'll dry the outside and discard that paper towel. And then we'll get the soap. I'll use the paper towel to open the door and store the basin back inside. These paper towels will now be thrown away. Barrier is going to be disposed of. And now I can remove my gloves. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm now going to gather the privacy blanket up and pull your sheet back up. So I'll collect the privacy blanket by lifting from the bottom or underside of the blanket. So pull the sheet up and ball the blanket up into a ball. That way no trailing edges will contaminate other surfaces. Okay, Ms. Jones, let me go put this in dirty linen. Are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here, like a magazine? Okay, here's your call light. If you should need anything at all, please let me know. I'm going to go open your curtain and wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll think about the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and then let the evaluator know my skill is done.
All right, any questions? Questions? No?
So if this patient is incontinent, would they still continue urinating while we're cleaning them?
Probably, yeah, probably, especially when you turn them on their side, like you clean the front, you turn them on their side to clean the back, they're probably going to urinate a little bit. Yeah,
What do we do?
just, they're going to be wet we're trying to get the older urine because as the urine hits the air and some of the liquid evaporates from it, that's when the acid gets a little bit more concentrated and we end up with issues. So we're just doing the best we can in a not ideal situation. Okay. So now you don't have to clean that because otherwise you would just be cleaning nonstop.
Yeah.
Now they do have a new product that's been out for probably about 4 or 5 years now. So it's still considered new, but it's called the Pure Wick. And we use it in female patients that are bedbound or when they're in bed. And it's, think of it kind of like a longer tampon with a plastic coating on one end, and it goes into the labia and it's mild suction. So as the urine comes out, it goes onto the cotton and then it just kind of gets sucked into a collection device. So you have less of the skin to urine contact with that device. So it is being it's going a little bit more mainstream. It's being used in a lot of settings now, which is really nice because it does help prevent complications.
This has something like that size.
Mhm. Yeah.
In between,
Right. Right.
the urine coming in.
Yeah, it's gentle suction, so it actually gets sucked out as it comes out of the body. Help save the skin a little.
Is there a term for when someone is not fully incontinent, but maybe they don't have, for some reason, like they're not getting signals and sometimes they'll just go?
Yes. So incontinence can be caused by a lot of different things. Okay. One is just that that valve muscle gets kind of flabby, doesn't really work real well. Sometimes incontinence can be caused by a neurological problem where the nerve that connects the valve to the brain doesn't work. It's that can happen after surgery. It can happen with multiple sclerosis, ALS, those types of things. Sometimes it can be tumor oriented or a physical abnormality where there's just something that's in the way and it doesn't operate properly. So incontinence can be caused by a lot of different things. Now, full incontinence is a little bit different than stress incontinence. And women are pretty familiar with stress incontinence, especially women that have had children, because all of that pressure, right? So when you're pregnant, you've got baby, which is, probably about 7 pounds. You've got the placenta, which is probably about 2 pounds. You've got the extra fluid in there, which is a couple of pounds. And everything down there gets all stretched out of shape. So all of this downward pressure and the laxity of the muscles tends to cause urine leakage to happen. Now, after you have baby and you've done all this pushing to get baby out and all that, a lot of times those muscles don't really go back together real well. And you can end up with stress incontinence, throughout the life. Now, stress incontinence is a little bit different. You're not wet all the time, right? True incontinence, you're wet all the time. Stress incontinence is any downward pressure on that valve causes it to open. So laughing, sneezing, coughing, jumping on a trampoline, lifting something heavy up. All of those types of activities can cause a little bit of urine leakage, and that's called stress incontinence. Pretty common with women that have given birth. There are some exercises you can do to help strengthen those abdominal muscles. And there's physiotherapy for it too in extreme cases. But a little bit different method of action. Good. Questions? We have 3 more skills to learn on Monday. We're going to learn catheter care, which is pericare with an extra step. We're going to learn emptying the drainage bag, which kind of goes along with catheter care. And we're going to learn the last range of motion. Remember the easy range of motions we've learned? We have 1 more to learn. So Monday is not going to be a hard day at all. It's going to be kind of rehashing some skills that we've already learned. And the rest of Monday will be available for practice as well. Okay. So the rest of the class is practice. I'm going to go print off your review sheets for today. So give me just a few minutes to print off the review sheets, and then you guys can practice. Let me check. Let's see here. Hi, Kaz. Thank you for joining us. And D Queen asked if the water gets very soapy, can we change it? Yes. Anytime the water is cold or soapy, it needs to be changed.
You have to change your gloves.
You should, yes. Right. Particularly if you use a paper towel between your gloves and the faucet, you're okay. But anytime I leave the patient environment, my patient bedside, and I go do something, I always put clean gloves on, because the first thing your gloves should touch is the patient. I would take them off, use a paper towel to get the water, check the water temperature, bring it back over, and put a new set of gloves on. But that's me, because I know that the first thing my gloves should touch is the patient. And I'm just afraid if I leave that bedside, I'm probably going to touch something without even being aware of it. Good. Does that make sense? That's why I teach you these rules, because these rules never change, ever. They're always the same. So moving forward, even when you're learning new skills, these rules should still be in play with any new skills that you learn. So when you're out there working, the first thing your gloves should touch is the patient, no matter what. So it should make it easy for you to kind of work out the flow of the way things should be done. Good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off, YouTube people. Join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. for our live question and answer session on YouTube for our normal weekly thing. I'll see you guys on Monday at 9 a.m. for another classroom session. And Tuesday is the practice test game show again at 11. And I'll remind you guys of that moving forward. So those of you who are watching and attending HOSA on Friday, I will be at HOSA at the booth, and I look forward to seeing all of you. I'll have giveaways. So make sure you come see me at HOSA. Talk to you later. Happy caregiving. Bye.